About to be
right
live. Now you are, yeah.
I'm on right now?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't believe you.
Oh man, I wouldn't have gone live because our guest just popped in. We could bring him on early. He's here. Or we could let's see. I'm trying to figure out what the most just thing to do would be. I'm not gonna end. It's gonna be judicious of me. I'm not. It's like the pun potential. Hi everyone. I'm Katie Halper. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. If it's a Wednesday night, I'm here with Nando Villa.
Yes.
Nando, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Nando is. I don't even know how to introduce you. I've known you for years, but what's your status right now? You're the co-host of
Yes. For the purposes of this show, the most important thing is that I'm the host of the Jacobin Weekends show with Anna Kasparian. Yeah. And I host Woke Bros every week with Oz.
When are you guys going to have me on?
Whenever. We don't really have guests, honestly. We only had one guest, which was Anna, to talk about the Armenia stuff. But we don't have guests.
I guess the other Holocaust. I guess the other Holocaust doesn't matter to you. You know, they were first, but we kind of
perfected it.
No, well, no. We wouldn't have perfect. Someone else maybe on us. But look, for better for worse, we kind of. There's so many anti-Semitic jokes that are pouring into my head that I'm just going to put onto the side because I don't want. No jokes about. I was going to say we kind of have a monopoly on that, but then the monopoly it's all a can of worms anyway. So, we had James Adomian on. I like your show. What is Woke Bros about?
Nothing. It's just like it's kind of like I like to see it as kind of like intro to left politics for sports fans.
Okay, so you're a gateway show.
It's on the Count. We're a gateway drug. It's on the Count the Things Network, which is like a lot of it's like mostly like Black culture and sports talk and things like that. And I'm one of the few non-Black hosts, I guess, of the network. And me and Waz do a show every week where we kind of talk about the news from like a left perspective, obviously, but kind of not like, focusing on like, it's for people who don't know who Peter Dow is. You know what I mean? Or like that Nero Tandon is evil. It's like,
it's and that like Peter Dow is a born again good person.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's kind of like an intro to left politics, I would say.
Yeah. Are you like the affirmative action hire?
Yeah.
On the network? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Actually, we won't drill down too deep into this, but you got this show hosted by Cenk Uygur, sorry. And he's of the Turkish persuasion. And then he has a sidekick who is this is not an insult to her, but like an Armenian.
Yeah, she's Armenian.
She's the Armenian human shield for him.
You're gonna get me in trouble, and you have no idea what kind of hornet's nest you're sticking.
Oh wait, is that? Oh come on, like there's a term for this. Like there's a term for the Armenian who's.
You really are like sticking your finger in a really bad hornet's nest, and you're gonna get like flooded on social media, and you're gonna get me in trouble, and you're gonna get Anna in trouble because she gets a ton of hate all the time for working for a Turk.
Oh, so she does. Well, that's ridiculous. Okay,
all the time. No, obviously it's ridiculous.
The reason I said that was because I really
every single day she just gets flooded with rape threats and death threats because she works for a Turk.
The Turk work punishment. All right. Well, my joke was not to make light of that, and I didn't know that there was an entire scholarship I hadn't read about related to that. My joke was the idea that it's like it's good. It's like his Robin, Howard Stern's Robin. Anyway, no, I don't think that that Cenk is a genocide denier at all. Now it sounds like I'm saying, like, do you beat your wife thing? All right, enough. Jesus, Louise. All right, geez, Louise. All right, anyway, Anna should come on and talk about Armenia, but I like the way that your show is, like, super accessible, not serious, and then you throw in Armenia.
Yeah.
But look, someone had to talk about it. When I had James on, he was like, thank you, Katie. You were, like, at the forefront of this. I had no idea what I'm talking about. James is smart and Armenian American and knowledgeable, but it was like, that was it. He's like, I have smart Armenian friends who will go on air at 3 a.m. Just put us on at 3 a.m. Anyway. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I'm sorry, everyone, about that Turkish delight of a hornet's nest that I poked. All right, so let's just. You want anything you want to say about your week? I know that you're okay, guys. Also,
I just moved. This is
please.
my new house.
Can you, Kelly? You're going to have to be more vigilant. People need to stop objectifying Nando Villa because it's just not. Because of two reasons. Two reasons. One, it's inappropriate, and secondly,
it's not inappropriate. It's totally appropriate.
As a socialist, I'm pretty sure that Nando wants us to share that attention if you're going to have to pay it. So that's all I'm going to say. All right. God, you guys are a bunch of ingrates. All right. So without any further ado, since we've given him this really professional intro, incredibly excited to have on a repeat guest, which is amazing given how busy he is and how, accomplished he is. He is a professor of history. Actually, he's the Henry R. Luce Professor of History and Jurisprudence at this dinky little school called Yale. And his name is Samuel Moyne. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Samuel, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you both.
You too.
Doing the same rounds of incestuous left media.
Yeah, I know.
Doing each other's shows all the time.
It's just the Supreme Court. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Such a good gig. Thank God we're having this constitutional crisis, right? It's really major, really good for your career.
I guess.
I mean, that was also kind of a joke because you are you tenured?
Yes, I have tenure.
All right.
Tough to get fired now.
Yeah, exactly. Then I got
like Patreon. You should start your own Patreon now. Get those Patreon dollars now that
right.
everyone wants to hear about
No, I've seen a lot of folks have gone, onto Substack and other ways of raising funds. But I'm doing this for free because it's just a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, you wrote a great piece at the New Republic. I even printed it out because are you guys, Nando, you're a couple of crucial years younger than me, I feel like, where it maybe makes a difference. I feel like you read on your phone a lot. I really like reading printed out things.
I like to protect the environment and not, kill trees.
Sure.
I'm an old man, so I try to print things out whenever possible.
Are you a textualist?
I guess I have a bias towards paper.
All right, that's good.
But I do read things on my phone when push comes to shove.
Yeah. So you co-wrote a piece with Ryan Derfler for the New Republic. It's called "Making the Supreme Court Safe for Democracy." Before we get into this, do you want to share any insights that you have into the hearing so far?
Well, there's not much to have insight into. I mean, it was the usual farce. The right is presenting its nominee as the most brilliant jurist that one could imagine, and the left is. The liberals, at least, are trying to find chinks in the armor. But it's very difficult. In this age, really for 30 years, we've had charades in part because many of these, prospective nominees have avoided saying anything controversial for really their entire careers. Now, in her case, you may have noticed that there were a few things that were discovered and views attributed to her through a paragraph at the end of a book review of someone else's book. This was the sort of level of it. Sheldon Whitehouse, I thought, the Rhode Island senator, went off script in the sense that, like a few other Democrats, he didn't even engage Amy Coney Barrett and just gave a kind of civics lecture about the role of dark money, which we associate with other places, but is actually sunk deep into the workings of the judiciary on the right. But otherwise, it was sort of your standard waste of time. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion that she'll be voted through.
Why do you think the Democrats are even kind of legitimizing this process? Like, if I was the dictator of the Democrats, I would have been like, no one show up, like, don't answer any questions, don't even ask any questions. This whole process is illegitimate and a sham. And even if the Republicans technically legally have the right to do it, like you can just do what the Republicans would have done, which was just say that this whole process is illegitimate and we're not going to participate. I saw Dianne Feinstein be like, that was a very impressive answer, to Amy Coney Barrett. And I'm like, why are you people just doing this? Why don't you fight at all? At all?
Well, I think it's a fair question. I don't think these are the kinds of folks of you can expect fighting from. They like comedy, they like norms, and they get rowdy only, the way I get rowdy. It's you barely notice, so you could, reasonably ask why, we're not seeing, we're seeing something very fateful happen, the kind of confirmation of reactionary power in an unaccountable branch of government. But, people are angry on podcasts and Twitter, but we're not seeing any social upheaval. And yet, in many ways, this is a decisive blow to our democracy, that there's yet another conservative vote. And so I think it's reasonable to ask why the Democrats are in the Senate are so passive. On the other hand, they don't really have any tools to fight back. The question is then what we do, what the Democratic Party does outside the Senate, and that's still open.
Well, so a couple of questions, and then we'll get it. Your thesis basically is not that this fight is a distraction per se, right? But that there's a larger issue, which is that we should be divesting the Supreme Court of its power, or weaken. How would you put weakening its power? Diminish, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Diminish. So beyond packing schemes, we need to diminish the High Court's power. So before we get into that, just a couple of questions of. It's like Shahid Buttar, who's running against Pelosi for Congress, and it used to be at the Electronic Frontier Foundation and is a big civil liberties and anti-surveillance guy. He was saying that the Dems had a couple of ways that they could challenge this. One is that they should not show up, refuse to show up because of COVID, so there wouldn't be quorum.
There were procedural hijinks that the Democrats could have engaged in.
Okay.
I think from what I can tell, it's doubtful that they could have derailed this. So they may have said, given that fact, we might as well, not put up a fight.
Okay.
Well, where's the logic behind that? Where's the logic behind that? Like there must be some value in fighting, even if you're going to lose. At least to rile people up in some ways for the next coming fight. I think that's it. Look, it's a totally reasonable question, and I don't have intel about it. I can only speculate that these are, folks who know they're about to seize power themselves and want to run the Senate in their own right, and they understand that this is Mitch McConnell's, last play. They can't, if they really know they can't stop it, maybe it's their calculus that they want to, play nice in order to, keep the Senate civilized when they run it. It's a pure guess. Have they not been alive in the last?
Sure.
I mean,
that's true, but
this is the Thomas Frankian thesis, right? Which David Sirota a couple of shows ago cited, which is that, actually the irony is that Sirota came on the show and made the argument that Dems should be making Supreme Court fights about corporate power and not cultural wedge issues. And he gave a very good example of Al Franken grilling Gorsuch, whose voice is low-key the most annoying voice I've ever heard. Oh my God, it is so cloying. He's like, Senator, I don't know. I couldn't say Senator. Anyway.
Right.
So he brought up the Gorsuch case where Al Franken went after him for siding with the employer who fired the truck driver who almost froze to death, right? And it was such a clear, inhumane, cruel, sadistic position, and he wrote a dissent. So it's not like it was an overwhelmingly, it's not like, oh, it's unfortunate, but the law demands it. So he brought that up, and then he said that this plays into, when they make it about abortion, they play into the Republicans' hands. And he said, and this is why, Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas, perfectly argues this. This is how people vote against their own self-interest, because everyone knows this who's watching this probably, but because of cultural issues, people wind up voting against their own self-interest. But then the other Thomas Frank book that's relevant to this is Listen Liberal, and The People Know, which is about anti-populism, but especially Listen Liberal, because that's where his big thesis is that it's not that the Democrats are spineless. I mean, they are that too, but it's not like they have no power and they're spineless, and if only they could be fighting the Republicans, but that when it comes to non-cultural and non-social issues, they either want what the Republicans want, or they're beholden to the same donors that the Republicans are. So if they did really go after Coney Barrett for the more corporate issues, that would upset their donors, is Sirota's thesis. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. So, which is kind of counterintuitive, because it's like, if you care about cultural issues, you want to talk about them less, which I know I'm going to get canceled for, but it's true, because that's polarizing. Anyway, so she's going to get on. I still think that Dems could, another thing that I'm going to quote Sirota once more. He said that Democrats are obsessed with norms and procedures, and they hold them more sacred than they do values. Whereas Republicans, it's the opposite. Like, they have bad values, but they're obsessed with their values and they don't care about norms. So I'm always curious if there's also more than meets the eye in terms of possibility. But so what do you think is being missed in this conversation about the Supreme Court? I mean, in an ideal world, the Dems both block this and at the same time have a discussion about the Supreme Court's power. But before we get into the how that would happen, can you summarize your piece and judicial review?
Sure.
As a concept over time?
It's surely the case, first off, that if the Democrats could derail this, I think they would. And it would be for the best to have a Democratic nominee on the court to replace Ruth Ginsburg rather than Amy Coney Barrett. Although, let's not forget, and this is in the spirit of David Sirota, that the Supreme Court, even before Mitch McConnell, has kind of taken control of it over the past few years, was already the most pro-business Supreme Court in a century. And that's because, our liberal party has been pro-business. I mean, maybe that's why their questions, were directed in the way they were. Although it's only fair to say that alongside the kind of resistance themes of, the fear that the election will be stolen, that the Democrats also made a big point of raising the profile of the threat to the Affordable Care Act. Right. So that is a law that is kind of hanging by a thread because business interests oppose it, especially, big insurance and other interests. So basically, our view in the New Republic piece is that in the end, no matter who's up on the Supreme Court, it wields too much power. And one reason the legislature is so dysfunctional, we kind of hear about it on occasion, mainly when it's swept into these nomination and confirmation battles, but it's not making many laws. And it's outsourcing a lot of its authority, not just to the judiciary. The judiciary, meanwhile, has gleefully taken a lot of its authority to censor the laws, to rewrite the laws, to strike down laws it doesn't like. And that's true regardless of who's serving. And so what we do is we look into history to try to figure out what progressives have done in the face of this situation in the past and what we can learn from that. So if you go back to the first Gilded Age, since we're in the second, you see a very similar picture, an unaccountable libertarian Supreme Court that, you know, may have some relationship to a lot of different forces, but is principally libertarian, protecting economic freedom against, you know, redistributive politics and popular politics. And the socialists who, you know, that was when socialism was even bigger in the United States briefly than it is even today, came up with a bunch of proposals to kind of defang the court, in particular to blunt its ability to overrule democratic laws. Now, in the end, after the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt decided that he would take the route of the court packing plan. And it failed, of course, but it did elicit a kind of, you know, détente between the, you know, progressive movement incarnated by the New Deal presidency and, you know, an allied Congress and the Supreme Court. But the form of that kind of like that piece was maybe deceptive, because essentially the Supreme Court said, you don't have to take our power away because we won't use it the wrong way. We won't ever make the mistakes we made in the first Gilded Age again. We won't interfere as much in the democratic process. And above all, we won't side with the wealthy again. And that piece broke down for very obvious reasons. In our day, the right, you know, wants to a new Gilded Age. And as we know on this podcast, a lot of the liberals also in the last 30 years have wanted a new Gilded Age. So it was useful to, you know, break the peace treaty and use Supreme Court power to achieve, you know, a kind of new hierarchy. It's also true that liberals, on behalf of, you know, the kind of jump starting the civil rights movement for the feminist cause, and, you know, and some other, you know, social justice campaigns, also decided to kind of break the truce and use Supreme Court power as a kind of quick fix or shortcut. And of course, that enraged the right on many of these social issues. And we can debate, you know, whether it was worth it. But the key is that the piece broke down in a sense, as both sides of the political spectrum agreed that for different reasons, the Supreme Court should take its power back. So if that's all true, I don't see why we would want to stick with just packing the court again, even if we could succeed in getting more liberal justices up there, because it's like repeating the same mistake. If we don't challenge the court's power, rather than just figuring out what personnel should serve, we'll have failed to learn from this you know, prior mistake. And so that's what the article tries to argue.
When you say challenge the court's power, what power do they actually have? Like, say, for example, a president ignored the Supreme Court, was like, yeah, no, just,
of course.
What could the Supreme Court do? Do they have an armed forces that they could call up and force the president to do it, or what? Like, I just strike, like, what could the president literally just ignore the court? Is my question.
Totally fair. You know, famously, I think it was Joseph Stalin who, you know, heard the Pope was angry at him.
Friend of the show.
Okay,
Yeah.
Fair enough. So, and memorably said, how many divisions does the Pope have? And, you know, the Supreme Court's judgments, there you go.
My Stalin babushka doll.
All right, excellent.
I'd be so offended by that.
Yeah, you're totally right. So here's my response to that. First of all, we know the norm respecting liberals are never going to go there. We can advocate that they do, but it's not going to happen. I mean, if they're deferential to Amy Coney Barrett in these hearings, the idea that you could get enough of a coalition together to just ignore the Supreme Court seems unlikely. But even if it were possible,
it would take someone like Donald Trump to do that, right?
It would. I mean, it's not above him, obviously.
Yeah.
I think that it would be one of his norms violations that became most radioactive to certain audiences. But I think in the end we have to recognize we need the courts. We need the courts. We need to tell them what to do. The purpose of courts is to serve democracy, not to be some site of resistance to it. And there are all kinds of functions that are important, like applying the laws that the Congress makes in litigation. So the question to me is, how do we face down the court while taking away the powers it's wrongly exercising, while also scripting the right role for it? And I'm not sure that just ignoring the judiciary leaves room for then making it our tool.
And can you talk about Marbury?
Sure. So that's a case in 1803. So go back. Thomas Jefferson, wins this election in 1800, and the opposition Federalists freak out. It's really the first. He's the first Donald Trump in a sense, because you get a whole Never Jefferson movement in response. They're so they think it's chilling that this populist has won, and in fact they engage in these extraordinary acts like stocking the federal judiciary before power changes hands. And Jefferson memorably says that his enemies are taking power in the judiciary and treating it like a stronghold. It's like literally what Mitch McConnell is doing right now. So what happens in Marbury, although the new Chief Justice named John Marshall, really the most famous justice really in the history of the Supreme Court, sort of relents and kind of adheres to Jefferson's new order. In 1803, he announces, in this case, Marbury v. Madison, the power of judicial review, namely the power not mentioned in the U.S. Constitution that the judiciary has to invalidate or declare void federal law. And actually, it was almost inconsequential at that time. I think, it was supposed to be like a symbolic blow, because Marshall basically wanted to say that Jefferson and his party was lawless. But it was like a time bomb, because what happened later in the 19th century, actually Marbury was not an important case for most of the 19th century, but right. In the first Gilded Age, when free market conservatives turned to the court as basically the new stronghold for their power against a rising progressive movement, they kind of dusted off Marbury and said, no, it's crucial in a democracy to have anti-democratic outposts like the Supreme Court. And that's why Marbury is important, that it became like the foundation in the late 19th century for this wave of attacks on progressive legislation. The most famous example of that is a New York law regulating the working hours of bakers that was invalidated in the case of Lochner versus New York, 1905.
Right. There's so much baker-related lawmaking.
Yeah.
Or legal controversies.
We teach that class. That's right. No, I mean, bakeries turn out to be, the central site of constitutional law.
The battlefield.
But we have lots of other interesting cases that we teach. I've just gone through with my students the filled milk case
What's
You
that?
know, that's where some folks wanted to make money by selling the cream, but still and putting other fat into milk so that it wouldn't be skim. And I guess some lobby got the Congress to pass a law saying that this was unhealthy, although apparently it wasn't. I don't know. So anyway, we look into other industries, milk. We look into the eyeglass industry. There's so many, there are other places than bakeries you have to learn a lot about. But you're right that baking is big in constitutional history.
Too hot to handle.
I guess that's right.
Should we take some questions from our viewers? By the way, just quick plug, make sure you follow Nando and Sam on Twitter. If you guys want to edit your names, you can put in your Twitter handles. And also, please become Patreon supporters of this show. But more like just for free, just share and like and subscribe. Share, like, subscribe. And if you feel like throwing $1 a month, which is like what, one fancy drink a year, then please become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Okay, so let's see. We got a bunch of questions. Let's see. Hi, everyone who's saying hi. I think I'm going to have Kelly at next show read these to me, kind of like Jimmy Dore and Steph do. Steph reads them. All right. You guys, a lot of you came from the Jimmy Dore show, so you actually know what I'm talking about.
That's a good question.
What? Where?
So a question just came in via super chat.
What was it?
Can the prof rank the current justices in terms of libertarianism, pro-corporatism, and how ACB will change the current court makeup in those terms?
That's tough. Because there have been studies, and you can find them on the internet if you Google Lee Epstein, who's really crunched the numbers. No
relation.
Yeah, absolutely, and found that it's a mixed bag, because many of the people we think of as liberals are actually also pretty pro-business. But someone there's no doubt that the conservatives, Neil Gorsuch and Sam Alito and Amy Barrett, from best we can tell, are going to be grievous to any kind of progressive legislation that a President Biden or a future President AOC should try to pass. Sam Alito had a whole campaign in which he was tacitly cooperating with conservative forces outside the Supreme Court to engage in union busting. And that Lochner case I mentioned, which consecrated a right to freedom of contract under the 14th Amendment, has in a sense been rehabilitated as a First Amendment case, and Sam Alito basically made the ruling that free speech requires that we can't force workers to join unions, and laws that that basically make unions possible are therefore constitutionally invalid. So it's a similar result, parallel to the first Gilded Age, just achieved like through a different interpretation of a different part of the Constitution. So he would rank high.
Who is the worst of all of them, just as a human being? And I tried to get you to tell me this last time, but you wouldn't bite. Like if any of them were more stupid or more dumber or stupider than others. But you're basically saying, I believe that you said that Clarence Thomas is not stupid. People think he is because he doesn't talk a lot, but he's actually very, very, very smart. Are any of them just a little subpar?
That it's not that I don't want to go there. It's true that I don't want to personalize the Supreme Court, because my problem is that we treat these. It's like it's a weird kind of Kremlinology. where we're obsessed with individuals and not looking at like the geopolitics of the Supreme Court.
Right.
But the truth is that they're all very gifted individuals.
Right.
I just wish they were doing something else.
I mean, yeah, Kremlinological. I had to look that up because you used that on the show last time, and it means when you get really why don't excuse me for my ignorance. But it's like when you're a person, like how would you define it? I know what it is now, but I can't recall the definition. But it's like very you're looking into the secretive. Cryptic.
Sure, you're trying to. I mean, we use the term court watcher, and there is a whole profession. There's like a class of journalists who specialize in it, and they're very well known, and they're having good days right now. A lot of podcasts themselves, and there's a lot of people spend time just trying to figure out what the court is doing based on minimal clues that they find in various places we could get into. And that's very parallel to Cold War criminology, where we knew very little, but we had to make big inferences, and people with purported expertise got a lot of power because they could read the tea leaves of what the Soviet Union was going to do next.
The long telegram.
Well, they were mostly wrong.
Right.
Is the funny part.
That's right.
They were mostly wrong about everything.
Correct.
The Soviets had like way more nukes than they had. That they were going to.
Absolutely. So maybe the parallel's limited because maybe the Supreme Court criminologists have a little more to go on, and plus many of them have direct leaks from the chambers of the justices, which didn't happen that often. It's not like the Kremlin. Someone in the Kremlin picked up the phone and called the Washington Post.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what's happening now in some cases. But
who's leaking?
Just, these debates you're going to get into about, leaks to the press and which ones are considered okay and which ones are considered criminal. And
when the undersecretary for, torture at the CIA does it, it's good. When Julian Assange does it, it's very bad.
Yeah. Very, very bad. And John Kiriakou, got to get him back on the show. Only person to ever go to jail involved in the CIA torture program. And that was because he we refused to engage in it. Okay, so Martin Radnock, do you think there is a place for force in judicial... do you think there's a place for force in judicial philosophy where the safety of all global warming requires engagement of all?
Is that like, we decide this via fist fight?
Maybe, yeah. That's a creative interpretation of Martin's question, which seems interesting. I'm going to interpret it my way, which is that
that's forceful.
The law is about saying that people have to be part of, the social good. And actually, the Affordable Care Act was sort of like that, where Chief Justice John Roberts faced it and said, we can't possibly read this law to mean that individuals are forced against their will into the insurance market. And so he found some other way to uphold the individual mandate. But absolutely, any serious reckoning with ecological crisis will require everyone to take part, rich and poor, and compulsion is what the law does. There's a place for coercion to make society better rather than worse. And the question is whether judges are so drunk on a libertarian ideology that they destroy society's attempts to improve. Precisely through legitimate coercion. So you really can't be a fan of freedom unless you find a way to justify coercion too, because no one's free kind of automatically. We have to create the social conditions for it. And that's going to involve a lot of coercion, not least the coercing the rich to pay their taxes, which doesn't usually happen.
Hot Channel says, I understand having to check the court's power, but shouldn't number of justices be expanded in order to mitigate the potential damage in the short run?
I'm not against court packing. I'm just suggesting that it's a limited remedy and it's a short-term remedy. I just want people to understand that if we do a minimal pack of 2 to kind of undo Mitch McConnell's damage, then we're putting the court back to where it was before Neil Gorsuch, which still was terrible. So there's a lot of potential damage that has already been done even before court packing was mainstreamed. And, a court packing does have this risk if we think the Republicans are going to take much power soon, that they could, strike back. The empire has struck back many times in constitutional history. And, do we want to find ways of making the fight within the democratic process rather than about which judges rule us? So I'm just suggesting that court packing, if it's chosen, should not be chosen as like a panacea. Actually, it could make things worse in the long run.
Democrats, this is very important to know, and this was, I think, a big scoop that David Sirota, I sound like I'm a David Sirota obsessed person. We had him on last week, but on Useful Idiots. But Democrats questioned Amy Coney Barrett for 3 days and did not ask her about her ties to Shell Oil or massive upcoming climate case involving Shell, even after she exposed herself as a climate denier. And yeah, her father is a Shell guy, and she also has some ties there. And you can also find this on her Wikipedia page. Sure. So I'm not sure why the Dems haven't brought that up at all.
Well, you identified their corporate friendliness. Right. It was very interesting that she said, look, I'm a jurist. I'm not a scientist. I think she was trying to say not to defend her in the slightest. It's just, I don't think it should be about her. Right. But she basically said, look, I'm not there because of my expertise in science. But the judgments I make will not require me to decide one way or the other what causes climate change. Now, the reality is that, the reason we should care about Supreme Court power is that you can't isolate kind of these high priests and priestesses and immunize them from their past and from their social milieu and from their class interests. So that's why we need to keep them on a short leash. So I don't think we should focus on like smoking out which ones are bad, and just know
that's just my thing I like to do. Yeah.
No. It's a great activity, and as long as we do it universally, and then realize that if everyone is subject to these influences, then maybe we should figure out how to organize power so that no one has too much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, or we could solve it by having more intramural opera trips, because Scalia and RGB went to the opera together.
No, that worked really well. I mean, it totally moderated Justice Scalia's jurisprudence that he hung out with a liberal.
Yeah. Do you guys remember? I should do a quiz at some point because there's some funny quotes. Okay, let's see. By the way, what are some scary things that she's already decided? Could you review some of those things? And how they're not about, and especially I'm curious the ones that are not, one of the things you say is that this is all politics. Everyone's doing politics on the Supreme Court and they're pretending that they're not. They're just using the law to do politics. But I'm just curious if there's some cases that stand out more than others as activist judge-ishness.
There are some red flags in her record, but she's been a judge just very briefly, 3 years. And in a way, it's not surprising for that reason that a lot of the Democratic inquiry kind of lacking big smoking gun opinions. She knew that she was being groomed for this. Kind of dealt with her relationships, not with her father, obviously, but with Justice Scalia, and with her interpretive methodology and with her scholarship, which really, did bear on, basically the relationship between her originalist jurisprudence and, what the implications are for precedents. Because it's right that the Democrats want to know, once she's kicked upstairs, she doesn't have to follow precedents as she does as a lower court judge. She has the power to just overturn precedents, particularly when she thinks as an originalist they conflict with the Constitution. So that's why it was much more significant that while she acknowledged that Brown v. Board and Loving v. Virginia, which condemn miscegenation statutes, were rightly decided, she would not take a view about Griswold v. Connecticut, which established the right of privacy and the right to use contraception in marriage, and especially Roe v. Wade. Now, I doubt that either of those will be kind of flamboyantly overturned. And she made the argument that even if the right of privacy were kind of deleted from the Constitution, it's actually not there anyway, but never mind. She said no state would ever pass a contraception ban again. So we're kind of, no worries.
Right.
Now, it's not true that no state would never pass an abortion ban. A few would. The day that, and actually several have gotten pretty far towards a functional abortion ban anyway. So, the idea that we're kind of focusing so much on Roe v. Wade, not acknowledging how far it's been undermined already, is I think, is interesting. But no, I can't identify like toxic opinions she's written that should have been at the center. I think it made sense that they weren't.
So it's not, there's no like Gorsuch thing where she ruled on the side of a corporation that fired a man for like basically driving away to save his own life from hypothermia. No,
I don't have it at hand, but I think there are a couple of kind of business friendly decisions that some have invoked. And, again, we could debate why they weren't more at the center compared to these kind of methodological interpretive issues.
Right. Maybe because the people are so at the center. You're welcome, everyone. Some puns for you all. JB says, is it fair to say the Warren Court that liberals celebrate? Oh, is it fair to say the Warren Court that liberals celebrate was an aberration, and SCOTUS since 1976 has been a return to form of SCOTUS pre-New Deal?
I think that's basically right. I would date it earlier. As of 1969, Earl Warren, left, and Richard Nixon appointed Warren Burger, and then there was a wave in the early 70s of Nixon appointees, including future Chief Justice William Rehnquist. So I think the turning point was really 1969, 70, 71. Now, it took a while, and not everything has been undermined. And in fact, in this area of the right to privacy, there have been, what progressives regard as major victories, even in this kind of more neoliberal era of the court's jurisprudence. And, the tough thing, not to get really controversial, is to figure out like how we, if we like the rights to personal autonomy that the court has defended, including the right to gay marriage, how we separate them from the rights to, freedom of contract, which is also a kind of commitment to personal autonomy. And maybe the fact that, for someone like Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was really, spearheading both kinds of autonomy, that they went together, it should be seen as significant in interpreting this whole era of the court. But absolutely, the Warren Court, was anomalous. And I think more than that, it was in part atoning for the Supreme Court's own past. Remember that Brown v. Board had to overturn the court's own decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, ratifying racial apartheid in schools as part of the unholy end of Reconstruction. And the Warren Court didn't get that far. it got further on paper and in let's call it formal emancipation than in actually creating or bringing about much racial equalization. And so this is the sad thing, that we learned that judicial activism turns out to be pretty ineffective for progressive causes unless linked to and really driven by grassroots movement and convincing our fellow citizens of our values. Whereas, the tyranny of the minority through the court in the first Gilded Age and the second works pretty well without lots of popular support, although it has, devastating consequences for ordinary working people.
Okay. And then we just a few more questions before I let you guys go, because I'm very grateful for your time. Let's see. Well, I should give you guys a quiz, by the way. See how well you know your. I mean, I can't because you guys are so anti-Kremlinological. But okay, let's see. Is someone clicking something, by the way? 1 second, sorry. Nando, any questions as I open up this email? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
No. I mean, I guess it's just the presence of the court and the power of the court is so ingrained in people's minds, and it's like you said, it's not really in the Constitution, or at least it wasn't set up that way. For these quote unquote, for all the so-called quote unquote originalists. The power of the court, I guess, in the original framing of the Constitution was much more limited than it is today. And I guess my question is maybe unanswerable, but should in some fantasy world, the Democrats do something radical, like maybe ignore the court or pack the court, which would probably be relatively radical.
Oh, sure.
At least for this current version of the Democratic Party. I suspect my suspicion is that in 2020, people would shrug and move on. The norms have been so shattered that no one cares about them anymore. And
I think you're right.
You could probably get away with it.
I'm sure you're right about that. I'm sure you're right about that. So first, the Constitution says there will be a Supreme Court. It doesn't say there will be any other courts, and it leaves it up to the legislature what all the courts should do. The Constitution most definitely doesn't give the power of judicial review to the courts, as Katie suggested. That's announced in 1803. Look, you're absolutely right. The main argument for doubting whether court packing is enough on its own is not that it would necessarily be ineffective. It's that do we want to leave an Uzi out on the table? Because whatever court we leave in this pivotal era of American history will be inherited by the future. And I think that was the mistake of the past, that they said the court's really powerful, we'll use it for good, and not understanding that their successors would use it for evil and much more grievously. So, I think you're right that there are, imaginable conditions in which the American people accept, the horrendous norm violation of packing the court. That's not the problem with packing the court. It's that it's a short-term gambit. Now, if it's connected to, the enfranchisement of the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, if there's a challenge to the Electoral College or even the Senate, well, then maybe, none of this matters as much. But there will always be political division. Right. And transferring power away from the democratic will formation of the legislature means that, as Jefferson originally said, that you can lose in politics and flee into the empowered judiciary as a way of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. That's what McConnell is doing right now. So I just don't see why we wouldn't want to seize the opportunity as soon as possible to make little moves alongside court packing if necessary, that degrade the power, because if we have the power to pack the court, we have the power to pass HR1, we have the power, don't we want our capital to be spent on big legislative achievements and saving the environment and so forth and so on?
Right. Okay, well, let's see. One more really quick round. I'll just say them all at once. Why worry? I'm not sure what this one means, honestly. It's why worry Republicans might return a court pack. Other way around, they'd pack, lie, cheat, and hell steal a whole seat. Wait, they already did that. Need to rule for the people of today, not the enemy of tomorrow. Sparky points out that until Bork Public didn't worry about nominees, which I think is true, right?
That's basically true. There are a few who, there wasn't, let's say, a culture of kind of challenging nominees, and that's because of polarization. That's absolutely true.
And what was his big thing? He didn't rent to.
He openly said what his conservative successors believe, and realize they should never write down until they have the power to determine the future of the country.
Right.
So he lost points for honesty and openness.
Right. Such an honest, open guy. So unfortunate. And Suavo says
he was a Yale law professor. So
he was. So you may be
bad. Just maybe
biased towards him. No, and you, by the way, Samuel, as you said on our last interview on this show, you want a non-Yale professor, non-Yale law person to be, because right now it's all Yale and all Harvard.
Well, if Amy Coney Barrett gets on, there will be one who isn't from Harvard or Yale. Right now it's 8. It's 4-4. It's a 4-4 tie, and she would be Notre Dame Law School.
Not okay. Just below subpar.
With those disgusting fighting Irish.
Yeah.
We're the Golden Eagles, baby.
There's a Yale Law parody account on Twitter that feigns outrage whenever Yale Law doesn't get enough love, and it's very angry about Amy Coney Barrett, obviously.
And in case people don't know, RBG did start out at Harvard, but she's not a Harvard grad because she graduated from Columbia Law School. Okay, and so this is related to the Bork question of not caring about nominations. Suavo writes, economically devastated voters don't give a crap about judges right now. They care about the stimulus bill. Nancy Pelosi dropped the ball big time. That sounds like is that Wolf Blitzer writing in? Just kidding. That was so unfair to Nancy, to Queen.
I mean, it is a sad commentary on our country that we're at this decisive moment of kind of need, and we're talking about the Supreme Court,
right?
And the Senate, the Congress really is out to lunch, except they come back because this is so important. And why is it important? Because no matter what the Congress does, if it ever should do anything, there's this other council of elders that gets to, censor the law potentially. So it probably wouldn't, mess with some stimulus bill. I wish the Congress would pass one.
Right.
But it's not irrational, given the court's power, for them to take very seriously who gets the seats.
Right. By the way, Columbia is great. I know. I grew up on the Upper West Side. My dad went to Columbia undergrad and med school.
I taught there for 13 years. So it's my homeland. It's my honorary homeland, I hope.
Yeah, it just doesn't rank. I mean, look, in those ranking books, it's not as high up as Harvard, but who cares about that? I'm just saying that she took an academic step down and a cultural step up by following her husband, who got a job in New York.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samuel Moyne, for coming on, and the Henry R. Luce Professor of Jurisprudence and History at Yale Law, author of many books. And your next one is coming out. Do you know when it's coming out?
I think next September.
Next September. So we'll have you on.
It's about the coming of America's humane war that's, less visible and becomes endless because of this fact.
Endless humane war. Yeah. Well, Nando, I'll direct you.
terrifying.
I'll direct you to our chat. It may be a Patreon only, but I think you're a Patreon. If not, I'll send it to you. Great. And again, thank you so much. Everyone follow Samuel. Nando, you want to sign off now too? Or
Sure.
all right. Okay, cool. So everyone say goodbye to Nando and everyone say goodbye to Samuel. And we are
Later.
about to bring on our next guest, Aaron Maté. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi. All right. I'm about to bring in our next guest. Wasn't that good? Wasn't that a good show? I'm going to encourage people to share this, subscribe. Do you guys know how to subscribe? It's really easy, and more people need to do it. We really got to bump that number up. And also, please join the Patreon. Again, just $1 a month, and you get to become a Patreon and save it. Yeah. Also, guys, it's kind of rude. Stop asking about the other guest when another guest is on. I mean, that I'm not going to look at comments except for very specific points because it's too distracting and I get too upset. And I appreciate how much you like Aaron Maté, but not cool. So don't diss other guests on the show. All right. So without any further ado, you guys have all rated and reviewed. You've all shared and liked and subscribed, right? You've all subscribed. And now we're going to bring in our next guest. And I will thank all the super chat, super stickers during our next break. And now we are going to bring in our next guest. This guy is a contributor to The Nation, at the Gray Zone, where he also hosts a great show called The Pushback. Aaron Maté.
Hey.
Hi. Sorry, I caught you right when you
caught me
about to
mid-can sip. Yeah.
What is it? What are you drinking?
Just watermelon sparkling water.
Spindrift? Is it that spin?
It's Waterloo.
It's
Waterloo.
Okay, I don't know that one. Yeah. Anyway, we'll take a drink. I will too. This is a new, different kind of drinking game. Yeah.
Because right when you're introduced, I'm like,
I know. Yeah. And you made that weird laugh sound also. Just kidding. Hi.
Hi.
I won't say the other person's name. So welcome to the show. Aaron, you've been very busy. You most recently testified virtually at the UN, in front of the UN. Can you tell people what you were talking about? And also then we got to get to the more important news of the day, which is of course the Hunter Biden controversy.
Yes.
Yes. Which is actually quite serious. Not the story, but the response to it, which we'll get into later.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to talk Syria first?
Well, it's up to you, actually. Should we get is Hunter on everyone's mind? Wait, do we want to start with start with heavy and go light, or the other way around? We can go either way. It's up to you. I'm going to punt on that one.
It's your show, Katie. I mean, you know.
All right. Let's start with Syria because that's a nice transition from Samuel Moyne talking about endless war. There we go.
Okay. So yeah, I testified recently at a special meeting of the UN Security Council about a story I've been covering for a while now. I've talked about it on your show. And to me, just to refresh for anybody who's unfamiliar with it, to me, it's the most important and overlooked story, the most important overlooked story of this century. And I cannot believe how little attention it's gotten, given what has come out. So basically, in April 2018, the Syrian government is accused of committing a chemical attack in the city called Douma, which is outside of Damascus. And based on that allegation, a week later, the US, Britain, and France bombed Syria. About a year later, a report comes out from the OPCW, the world's top chemical weapons watchdog, basically supporting the US government narrative that there was a chemical attack by the Syrian government. They don't directly lay the blame on Syria, but that is the inference of their report. They say that there's reasonable grounds to believe that a chemical weapon attack occurred and that the chemical weapon was chlorine, which is what the US government said to justify its bombing. Then, though, we start getting leaks showing that the actual inspectors from the OPCW who went to Syria and investigated this on the ground reached a far different conclusion. And the more leaks we get, the more it is obvious that this was a cover-up, that the inspectors wrote an initial report that pointed to this incident being staged on the ground by the militants who controlled Duma at the time, which makes perfect sense because this notion that the Syrian government would launch a chemical attack on Duma never made any rational sense. They were about to retake the territory from this extremist militia called Jaish al-Islam, which was shelling Damascus from Duma. And so for the Syrian government to launch a chemical attack all of a sudden with chlorine would have meant that Syria did the one thing that they knew would trigger the so-called red line, which Trump was very clear on enforcing. He had bombed Syria the year prior based on another dubious chemical weapons attack allegation. So basically, it was to believe the official story, you had to believe the Syrian government decided for some reason to invite U.S. military strikes on their country. And the evidence that these inspectors collected pointed to this being staged on the ground. But all these leaks show that all their evidence was suppressed, it was censored, conclusions were rewritten to come to a conclusion that was the exact opposite of what the inspectors had found, and to basically lend support to the U.S. government narrative. We also found out that this occurred under U.S. government pressure. A U.S. delegation visited the OPCW and essentially tried to tell the inspectors what to say. We also learned that the inspectors who oversaw the investigation, who went to Syria, that they were removed from their own investigation and replaced by a group that was not there at all, except for one paramedic, a paramedic who is, doesn't have scientific expertise, to say the least. So this is a cover-up based on the leaks that we get. And so since this has come out, the inspectors have tried to have a fair hearing. They've been attacked by their superiors. They've been maligned. They've tried to get the evidence that was suppressed to be weighed in a transparent manner. And they're trying to repair their reputations because after it was revealed, the OPCW leadership attacked them. And the response from the media in the US has been complete silence. And that's across the spectrum. Even progressive adversarial sites have ignored this story, except for the Gray Zone and a few others. And I just cannot believe the media censorship, because this is a Trump administration scandal. Trump bombed a government on allegations that were undermined by the OPCW investigators who went on the ground to investigate it, and then pressured the OPCW to cover it up. So this, whether or not even the scientists are right, I'm not a chemist or an engineer, so I don't have the expertise to judge. But the point is, the fact that it's documented that their findings were censored, that is a story in itself. And the fact that there's been such an effort to vilify them and to refuse to let them air their evidence says a lot. And I think should tell you about who is actually right here. So I went to the UN. I was invited by Russia and China convened a meeting of the UN Security Council. And so I spoke along with actually one of the inspectors who was on the Duma investigation. There are many inspectors, but only two have been identified as the ones who pushed back on the cover-up. And one of them spoke as well. And it was just very instructive because, we're coming face-to-face with ambassadors from the US and Britain and France. And none of them had any interest in the actual facts. All they could do is smear us and say that we're part of a Russian disinformation campaign and talk about how the OPCW is, this paragon of integrity and how we're attacking the OPCW. What I was actually doing is defending the OPCW from political exploitation and political compromise to justify US-led wars. And the crazy part is that this, a week after I spoke, there was another UN Security Council meeting where Russia, which is this month chairing the UN Security Council, it rotates. So this month it's Russia's turn. Russia invited the OPCW's first director general, the guy who helped found the organization. His name is Jose Bustani. He's a veteran Brazilian diplomat. And the US, Britain, France, the same countries that bombed Syria based on the allegations that these inspectors' evidence undermined, these countries blocked Bustani from speaking because he was coming to speak in their defense. So what does that tell you? When the evidence is covered up, the inspectors are maligned, and they're not given the chance to air their evidence. And now the OPCW's first director general, a distinguished diplomat who comes to speak in defense of his own inspectors, who, by the way, he worked with, because these guys are so veteran and experienced that actually their tenure coincides with the first director general of the organization. And the US and its allies blocked Jose Bustani from speaking because, just like the evidence, they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I was watching some of your testimony, and of course, you were. Who's the gentleman who referred to your tweets as like proof why you shouldn't be taken seriously? Yes, this is a supposed diplomat, the British ambassador to the UN, and he actually said he had a line that was written for him to like dismiss all the briefers. So I was one of them. There also was Ted Postel, who's a professor emeritus at MIT, former Pentagon advisor, very credentialed, award-winning scientist, and Ian Henderson, an actual member of the OPCW investigation team that went to Duma and an actual scientist. And so this British ambassador, someone wrote, a line for him in a way to like, obliquely diss all of us. And his line for me was, we've heard conspiracy theories from journalists whose Twitter feeds tell us all we need to know about the supposed independence of their reporting. But I'm paraphrasing. I think it's a pretty close quote. Yeah. And it's like, first of all, it's like, I'm not even sure what he's referring to about my Twitter feed, and like he didn't make any specific criticism, so I don't even know what he takes issue with. But regardless, like, what does my Twitter feed have to do with, not just whether my reporting is reliable, but also more importantly, whether or not an OPCW investigation was compromised, like whether the facts are the facts or not, So just so funny that this is like this is how a diplomat behaves. And he also insulted Ian Henderson, who's like an actual OPCW scientist with actual experience and credentials, who conducted the actual investigation. And it just speaks to how, this is a cover-up, and it continues. Yeah, I mean, there's two issues. One is what really happened, and then one is just looking into what really happened. So it's not even like they're denying what really happened. They're doing that too, but they're just preventing review of it. Yeah, and to the point where they don't even let the OPCW's first leader, Jose Bustani, speak. Which is unprecedented. It doesn't happen very much that someone is blocked from speaking who is invited to the UN Security Council. It almost never happens. It's happened a couple of times. Certainly, it's never happened before to a former head of a international organization, which happens to be the one that is under discussion at the UN Security Council meeting. And the irony of them blocking Jose Bustani is that this is not the first time that he's been targeted by the U.S. government. He was the head of the OPCW back in 2002. I remember. When the Bush administration was driving to invade Iraq. And what's funny is the year before, Bustani's tenure had been unanimously renewed because, he was respected by everybody. He brought like dozens of countries into the Chemical Weapons Convention. He actually grew the Chemical Weapons Convention Treaty faster in terms of signatories coming in, faster than for any other multilateral body or convention ever. So it was the fastest rate at which countries joined a multilateral treaty as important as the Chemical Weapons Convention. And they had huge success. They, destroyed a whole bunch of chemical weapons around the world. Even there were inspections being conducted, in the US. But the problem is Bush administration comes in, and at that point, Bustani is talking about bringing Iraq into the Chemical Weapons Convention. That would have been a major problem for the Bush administration because that would have subjected Iraq to inspections by the chemical weapons inspectors at the OPCW. But the problem is, at that point, the U.S. had been caught using the United Nations to spy on Iraq. So using their inspectors to spy on Iraq. So that basically left the OPCW as the only last option for a rigorous and inspection regime that would be accepted by Iraq. But if Iraq were to accept inspectors, that would have undermined the Bush administration's ability to invade it and justify its war. So John Bolton personally threatened Jose Bustani. He threatened him with personal harm. He said, "We know where your kids live, and you have to resign." Bustani refused. So they tried to kick him out on a executive council vote, the same body that had unanimously renewed his contract the year earlier. The U.S. lost there. So then the U.S. took it to all the member states, and they threatened to pull the OPCW's funding, which the U.S. supplied a huge percentage of it. And there was a vote. And what's funny is
more people did not vote to remove Bustani via either no's or abstentions than voted to remove him. But the U.S. still won. They still won. They still managed to win because there were enough yes votes, even though in the majority were either no's or abstentions. So, and Bustani was kicked out. And by the way, he says he would have resigned anyway, ultimately, because he couldn't stay on with the U.S. threatening to pull all that money because the organization wouldn't have survived. And Bustani actually later won a judgment to get compensation, which he gave back to the OPCW for a fund in support of Global South countries to help them basically stand up to U.S. bullying. So just fast forward now, 18 years later, once again, Jose Bustani stands in the way of another U.S. deception to justify war. And once again, they target him and they try to silence him once again. But we actually he recorded his statement in a video, which we published at the Gray Zone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what there is to say. Oh, by the way, what was their excuse for not letting him testify?
They said he wasn't appropriate. They said he wasn't qualified. They said that because he left the OPCW before the Syria chemical weapons file was established, because the Syria chemical weapons file of the UN Security Council, I think, was established in 2013, and Bustani left the OPCW a decade earlier. But the problem with that is, the OPCW, the Syria chemical weapons file at the UN Security Council pertains to the OPCW. And this guy was the OPCW's first director general. And also, he worked with the inspectors who are challenging the cover-up and whose investigation was compromised. And so he can certainly speak to their scientific ability and their integrity. And he also can speak to his own experience with the U.S. pressuring his body to justify its wars, which is exactly what happened in the case of Syria, because as I said before, a U.S. delegation was sent to The Hague in an unprecedented move. This has never happened before, to basically meet with the inspectors and tell them what to say and present them with this phony science to convince them that there was a chlorine attack. And by the way, the irony here, so Jose Bustani gets threatened and kicked out under John Bolton's watch. John Bolton oversees this as a Bush administration official in 2002. The bombing of Syria that these inspectors investigated takes place under John Bolton's watch. It's actually John Bolton's first day on the job. And 3 months later, after the bombing of Syria, when this U.S. delegation visits the OPCW, I would bet that John Bolton had a role in that, because he has an established practice and it works.
Right.
The U.S. can do whatever it wants. It can bully people. It can bully global institutions into doing what it wants because it's the mafia don. It can, it tells people what to say and they obey.
Yeah. And with him, you just see it in his, I mean, this is not like, you see it in his behavior and his interactions, his saying that he thinks, saying publicly that like it would be good if the UN headquarters in New York, like a bunch of
lost some stories.
He also banged on some woman's door, apparently very aggressively, during some kind of fight in Moscow, I think, of all places. And yeah, that's why he makes me like Trump. I'm telling you, when it was Trump and Bolton fighting, I was way team Trump. I mean, I don't like either of them, but he's so terrible and he's such an unrepentant and committed hawk that makes
we'll just remember Trump hired him.
I know.
Why. And it's a reminder that for all Trump's rhetoric, he still always goes with the hires and goes with the warmongers. And even though Bolton's gone now, it's not that much different. But just but yet even Bustani being blocked hasn't made a dent in the media. The story has been completely silenced. And I think the reason is pretty obvious. There's been, just a complete bipartisan alignment around the Syria proxy war. Nobody questions it. If there's any criticism of Obama on Syria, it's that Obama's criticized inside the establishment for not intervening enough, that Obama should have done more. Obama should have, bombed Assad when he could have.
Right.
When in reality, the U.S. under Obama spent, if you believe the Washington Post, $1 billion a year on a CIA program, to arm and equip these so-called Syrian rebels. the same ones who helped pull off that chemical weapons deception in the city of Douma. And we know that most of the weapons and the training and the aid benefited the most extremist of the rebels, including Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and that's whose side the U.S. was on. So if Obama is criticized, it's not for helping destroy a country with a murderous proxy war. It's not doing it enough. And Trump has essentially continued the policy. The proxy war is over, but now he's imposed murderous sanctions that prevent Syria from importing medical equipment and food, and Syria is suffocating. It's also preventing Syria from rebuilding from the proxy war that we fueled. And these chemical weapons allegations against Assad are a tool in that. When the U.S. now justifies its sanctions that deny Syrian kids food and medicine, it brings up these chemical weapons attack allegations. So it's obvious that this OPCW has been exploited politically to be used as a weapon to justify U.S. wars, whether it's the proxy war over the last decade or it's the economic warfare going on now. And by the way, Trump is also occupying a huge part of Syria, the breadbasket of Syria, and to, in his words, take the oil. And so this policy is bipartisan. I think that's why, even though you have a scandal at the world's top chemical weapons watchdog, you have a cover-up, you have U.S. pressure, you have the fact that this was used to justify a bombing of a foreign country, you have the distinguished former head of the OPCW being prevented from testifying. Try to find it in media. It's at the gray zone. It's at a few places. Democracy Now!, which has totally ignored this story, they kind of mentioned this. They did a mention of this story on their show, but they also butchered it and got it wrong because they've also unfortunately bought into the pro-war narratives on Syria. So I just never seen anything like it. I've never seen a story so important, so censored in all of media, not just in the corporate media where we're used to it.
Right. And I just want to give you not the chance, because that makes it sound like you did something really unforgivable or something, but something that one of the things that people like to say, they like smear you. No one engages in the content of what you're saying. But something is they're like, oh, he had to retract something. He had to, which you didn't. You made a correction. Can you just talk to that so we can get that out of the way?
Okay. So, all right.
Maybe I shouldn't even bring that up because it's so stupid. No, but I figure it's a good thing because for those people who, in case someone tries to pull that on you, viewers and listeners, this is what you can say.
Yeah, sure. So I've written a bunch of articles on this OPCW story because I've gotten some leaks from inside the OPCW. And one of the stories, I said that the OPCW has made false statements about Ian Henderson, who was one of the whistleblowers. I said that, I said that the leadership said that Henderson was not a member of the fact-finding mission that went to Syria that investigated, and also that the leadership said that he played a minor supporting role. So I showed the documents. I have the documents, and I showed them, saying that despite the OPCW leadership saying that Ian Henderson was not a member of the fact-finding mission, I have all these documents from the OPCW showing him to be a member of the fact-finding mission. So that was the major part of the story. Other part of the story is that they also, so they said that he played a minor supporting role in the investigation. And I showed that to be false by showing all the things that he actually did in the investigation, including going to one of the locations in Douma where the cylinders were found, taking measurements, tagging the cylinders, and also visiting another site. So, but what I also said is that he was tasked with leading one of the visits during that mission. And I said that that is proof that he was actually playing a major role, not a minor one. What I got wrong is that the claim that he was tasked with leading one of the visits, that turns out to be only have been a contingency. So they said, if needed, we'd like Ian Henderson. We are fine with Ian Henderson leading this one visit. So basically, I got wrong an instruction that turned out to be a contingency. So I didn't initially say that that was a contingent plan. Right. That was a mistake. So you have people out there who support the Syria proxy war, who support the CIA narrative, who want to believe that the Syrian proxy war, that for like 10 years, Assad was bombing just like innocent protesters demonstrating for freedoms, when those were the protests of 2011, when people were marching for reforms and against a police state, because that's what Syria is under Assad. but they conflate those protests with like the next decade of the U.S. arming and funding and supporting and sending anti-tank weapons to rebels who ultimately were taken over and fought with Al-Qaeda and other sectarian groups that committed horrible atrocities, which Syria proxy war cheerleaders want to deny and want us to believe we're all just like freedom-loving rebels. So people like that will take a minor error and try to discredit all the other reporting that I've done, and all the other facts that have come out about the case that have nothing to do with anything that I reported. They come out before me, so it's but like we're used to that. That's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, just the Bustani thing on its own is enough for people to take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. It should be.
And then all the other facts that you found out. But yeah. And
what does it tell you if there's such a dogged effort to silence the inspectors who carried out the investigation and the former head of the organization? I mean,
well, to be fair, the people who go after you on this, they're also very hard on people who push conspiracy theories, unfounded conspiracy theories about Russia. So at least they're consistent.
Yeah, I somehow doubt that.
That was me being very sarcastic. Sorry, I'm a little tired, so it didn't land.
No,
but,
I was. Right. I knew you were kidding, but I wanted to make sure.
Okay, I mean, if you could, it would be so cool to look at the ratio of like lies, or to be charitable, mistakes to corrections or retractions on like in one direction, and mistakes and retractions and incorrect things in the other direction. So something I wanted to talk to you about was because I have to be honest, I was almost like, oh wait, but how could we're so close to the election? Should I really have a show on this? I'm just being honest. That was in the whatever part of my brain, which is a problem, and I think it speaks to a problem in media. But it's also a problem that we see with this Hunter Biden story. Now, the nice thing about the Syria story is that people who are afraid of anything that's negative about Biden or anything that makes Trump look good. The nice thing about this is that Trump is one of the bad guys in the Syria story.
Yeah, but the problem is Democrats, they support the policy. They support, I suppose, compromising the OPCW, and they support bombing Syria and strangulating Syria with sanctions, that they're not going to say anything about it. But they could. They could make this a massive scandal. Trump, you bombed Syria on false grounds and then pressured a international organization to cover it up. I mean, that's a huge scandal right there. That to me is impeachment worthy. But Democrats don't impeach presidents over policies that they support. So that's why we don't hear about it. And that's why in the media, there's such uniform silence.
Right. Really ridiculous. And in case we need to see an example of that, let's go to today's news about Hunter Biden, which we all knew about, basically knew it's true. What's interesting here is this is kind of a meta story, because we have a story about Hunter Biden, and then we have a story about how people responded to this story. So should we look at the story first? Let's look at the story.
Yeah.
All right. Were you following this in real time, by the way?
I mean, I caught a little bit of it. It's not a very big surprise. I mean, there's always been something shady going on with Hunter Biden and Ukraine. It was one of the reasons why I thought this impeachment thing over Ukraine and the Bidens was such a big mistake, because I knew that even if, Joe Biden's primary opponents ignored, Hunter Biden's dealings with Ukraine, I knew Trump wouldn't. And the fact that Hunter Biden got a lucrative board seat on a Ukrainian gas company while his father was running point in Ukraine, and just not long after his father's government had engineered a coup in Ukraine to change the government, I knew it would come back to hurt Joe Biden. And it was just so obvious. And now it's bearing fruit with this. I mean, this story, it's some of the suggestions from it are not confirmed. So there's it looks like there was a meeting between a executive at Burisma and Joe Biden, because he wrote Hunter Biden to thank him for arranging it. And the Biden team has put out a denial that was a qualified denial, they say that they don't rule out that there was some kind of meeting. All they said was that there was nothing on the official schedule. So it's quite possible, but it's not confirmed that there was a meeting yet. But the fact that Biden has denied ever speaking with his son about Burisma and his role there, this just raises more questions over whether or not that's true. Although it's not, it doesn't prove that it's not true, but it certainly raises more questions that it's not.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read. And of course, this is one of those things where it's like, I'd like to read this at a place that's not the New York Post. But one of the problems that you encounter all the time, right, is that like there is no discussion outside of certain parameters on the left, except for a few places, including, for instance, the gray zone. And so, and then people will then use the fact that you're reading an article from the New York Post, or that you're citing something from the New York Times, citing something from Tucker Carlson, or appearing on Tucker Carlson to delegitimize someone, or suggest that they're right wingers, or they're Putin plants, or they're Trump supporters. And again, the larger problem is that there's a silencing of anyone who's not on the right. And like, these people should not be the only place you can go to talk about Syria.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just read a little bit. Oh, sorry. I just want to thank Martin Rad. Thank you so much for this question. Wow. Is there any good arguments for keeping any of these international institutions? ICC applies to only non-Westerns. IAEA, CIA influenced it before Iraq War II, and now OPCW, when they are impotent in face of real issues.
There's a good argument to not trust them. I mean, the point about the ICC only prosecuting essentially African heads of state and nobody from the West. I mean, that's a great, but
Norman Finkelstein calls it, what is it? The Caucasian Criminal Court?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know Norman coined that. There's certainly a reason not to trust them. I like to believe in the idea of international institutions. In theory, they can often bring accountability and help curb, unipolar abuses. But certainly, they need to be reformed. But the hope, though, is that a case like this, with enough political pressure, if ever the media started paying attention to it and actually recognizing it for the scandal that it was, hopefully it could lead to some political pressure to change, because the OPCW has done very good things in its past, especially under Jose Bustani. It almost stopped a war. I mean, Jose Bustani almost stopped the Iraq War.
Oh my God.
If the U.S. hadn't managed to oust him, then Iraq would have been subject to inspections, and it would have been really, really difficult for the U.S. to make its case that Saddam was hiding some weapons. So, even though these things get compromised, I think the argument is for just trying our efforts to defend them rather than abolishing them. Yeah.
Let's see. So there were a treasure trove was delivered, and I'm just reading again at the New York Post. Sorry. Hunter Biden introduced his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, to a top executive at a Ukrainian energy firm less than a year before the elder Biden pressured government officials in Ukraine into firing a prosecutor who was investigating the company, according to emails obtained by the Post. The never-before-revealed meeting is mentioned in a message of appreciation that Vadim Pozhorinsky, an advisor to the board of Burisma, allegedly sent Hunter Biden on April 7th, 2015, about a year after Hunter joined the Burisma board at a reported salary of up to $50,000 a month. Oh my God. Remember, no experience, right? I'm not Hunter shaming. I like Hunter. I feel bad for him. I think he's got a raw deal. My heart goes out to him.
Sure. I mean, he's a sympathetic character. I mean, he had
I think so too.
He had a serious drug addiction.
Yeah.
But also, by the way, it might not even be 50,000. It could have been up to 83,000 a month. That's what some reports say. Yeah, with no qualifications. I mean, it's just naked corruption. If any of the Trumps had gotten a gig like that, we'd be hearing about it nonstop.
Right. And that's the other thing. People are like, but what about the Trumps? It's like, no one's saying that there's the same level of nepotism. No one, but like, you can't just pretend it doesn't exist, although the media would like to do that. And in fact, look, I think it's going to be a moot point because I think Trump is going to get trampled, but who knows? But if it were closer, something like this could have actually harmed Biden, and keeping it under wraps instead of kind of litigating it out in the open is exactly why something like this gets dropped in October.
Yep, exactly.
But again, so people aren't doing anyone any favors when they don't let the natural, selection process happen. Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spent some time together. It's realty, an honor and pleasure. And an earlier email showed Pojarski. Do you know how to say that? Pojarski? Pojarski?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I mean,
Pojarski,
someone in the chat maybe can correct me.
Yeah, can tell us. Yeah, can berate me. Pojarski reported Burisma's number 3 executive asking Hunter for advice on how you could use your influence on the company's behalf. The blockbuster correspondence, which flies in the face of Joe Biden's claim that he's never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings, is contained in a massive trove of data recovered from a laptop computer. And here's one of the things, which was dropped off at a repair shop.
Yeah, in Delaware.
Yeah, in Delaware. And
he never came back for the laptop, which is just so sad. Like, Hunter, come on, man. You know your dad's gonna run for president.
Wait, oh my God, wait. I thought someone stole. Oh my God, I thought it was like a drop-off location. Someone stole it and was like, no, but they're actually saying this is like the Podesta thing, where we think it's much more nefarious and much more effort than it actually is. Oh my God.
Yeah, Hunter. I mean,
Hunter left his.
Hunter left his own. And it's just, and they find videos of him engaging in a sex act, and he's got a crack.
Oh, wait a second. Hold on, 1 second.
No.
Hold on. The customer who brought in the water-damaged MacBook Pro for repair never paid for the service or retrieved it or a hard drive on which his content were stored, according to the shop owner, who said he tried repeatedly to contact the client. The shop owner couldn't positively identify the customer as Hunter Biden, but said the laptop bore a sticker from the Beau Biden Foundation, named after Hunter's late brother and former Delaware Attorney General.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be someone trying to set him up.
Well, it could be. Well, yeah, sure, it could be. But what are the odds of that? That's a pretty crazy setup. And it has videos. It has Hunter's own videos. So what it looks like is that this was Hunter's laptop. And maybe someone from his family, maybe someone was from his family. Hunter did have a relationship with his late brother's wife after he passed. So,
after he passed,
After he passed, sorry, so maybe, but the point is, Hunter's troubled, or he was troubled at least then, and now this information is out, and I think Trump is doing so bad.
Yeah,
his coronavirus handling has been so bad. His demeanor and the way he behaves is so awful that I'd like to think that enough people are sick of it by now and are ready to vote him out, and the polls certainly indicate that. So and also this story is being censored online and in the media. Certainly, I don't think CNN has even acknowledged it tonight.
That's the thing that's just unbelievable. It's not unbelievable. Every time I think something is unbelievable, it's actually just true. But they're actually Facebook and Twitter are what is it that you're not? I'm trying to get the deets about what they're.
You can't share the story. If you try to share the New York Post story, they won't let you.
All right, let's try this in real time. Ready, guys? I'm going to go into my Twitter. All right, I'm going to copy this New York Post story. All right. Now, let's see. I'm going to stop screen share and start a new one. I'm going to go into my Twitter. This is a thing that I hate that I do, which is when I narrate what I'm doing when I open up a screen share. Okay. Let's see what happens. Ready? Okay. Wait, is that the wrong? Which one is open right now? Okay, that's the right one. Ben Shapiro's up there, right? For some weird reason.
Well,
Because I put in New York Post. That's why I put in Hunter Biden. Duh, okay. All right, let's see. Just gonna
also,
try this out.
don't you just want to know what Ben Shapiro's thinking at all times?
Oh yeah, it's true. He's my pinned tweet.
I mean,
I wish that would be cool actually if you could just constantly have like could I filter out everyone but Ben Shapiro? Oh, and look what else is trending. Of course, Russian experts question Rudy Giuliani's role in New York Post revelation of Hunter Biden's emails.
yeah, of course. It's always Russia. Anything that threatens the centrist establishment consensus is just Russian disinformation. I heard the same thing at the UN Security Council when I tried to present, the case for this being a huge issue and there being a cover-up of a OPCW investigation in Syria. It just gets dismissed as Russian disinformation.
Right? Yeah.
It's
Also,
one size fits all. It's like it applies to everything. And of course.
And it's always the Russians.
It's always the Russians. Yeah.
Imagine if we were like the Chinese.
Yeah.
The Chinese attacked, in the 1950s maybe, but okay, here we go. Ready? Testing. What should we say, guys? Testing to see if Twitter really is engaging in censorship. And then I want to put it out there that I'm Hunter positive. I'm Team Hunter, but still. But still would like the power to share news. Let's see what happens. Ready? Share news. This is ridiculous. Isn't this like what the Russians do?
Well,
it's like imagine another country doing this.
And I wonder if they reversed it by now. Oh no, you can't.
We can't complete this request because the link has been identified by Twitter or our part. What? Hold on. I won't be shut down. Okay.
No, you can't do it.
Or our partners is being potentially harmful. Visit our help center to learn more.
Yeah.
What do you think their help center would say?
Nothing. The point is
that would be great. Here's I'm going to do a workaround. Watch this. Ready, guys? This is like psyops. Oh, is it like let's see, hold on. Something went wrong, but don't fret. Let's give it another shot. I don't think so, Twitter. I've heard that one too many times. All right, hold on. Okay, now I'm going to, just so we can spread the word and show what's happening. Because someone needs to know. Nice thing from Shuja. All right, I'll be like, this is the tweet. The globalists won't let you post. Just kidding. I won't say that.
Don't say globalist.
I won't. I know. This is the tweet. You can't. What happens when you try to?
It's so embarrassing.
It's so insane.
It's so embarrassing. And it's, because look, first of all, there's been speaking of Russian disinformation, so much of Russiagate was just straight up disinformation, all of it, for more than 3 years, nonstop, everything. Almost every single day there was a bullshit story. Yet there's no restrictions on that. There, a lot of the stories came from leaks, and even leaks that are against the law. But there's no effort to enforce the law there. So, and there shouldn't be, because we shouldn't be restricting information, even when it's false, like in the case of Russiagate. And now they're trying to apply this here. And, on top of the principle and the precedent that it sets, where now this can be used against anybody, especially I think progressives, because progressives always bear the brunt of this stuff. Just politically, what a gift this is to Trump and to the right. If the story just been allowed to go, I think it would have died down after a day.
Yeah, no,
but now
I know.
It's going to become a free speech issue, and rightfully it is a free speech issue. So
yeah,
they're going to,
people are so dumb about this.
And so it also just brings more attention to it. But there's been, like the way Biden has been covered, way even before this, like with impeachment, like every time they would bring up Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and if you read any news, like major news, like liberal news media account, they always have this line like, "There's no evidence that Biden's engaged in any wrongdoing,"
Right.
every single time, which was like this like boilerplate line to just try to minimize the story, when really what was already established actually shows that there was something really sketchy, which is that Hunter Biden, this drug addicted, unqualified son of Joe Biden, got a lucrative Burisma board seat for up to $83,000 a month, right after his father helped engineer a coup in Ukraine. So of course it's a story, but there was just, because the media is in lockstep with the neoliberal establishment of the Democratic Party, there was just it was totally censored, and this is the next logical step in that, where now a new revelation comes out, you can't even share it. It's not only just being ignored, they're literally blocking people from sharing it, and it's Orwellian. And of course, the stuff will only, I think, benefit the right and come back to hurt the left.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And also, it's like, what the left is losing its mind. Oh, Kelly's saying that's why they did it. I don't know what that means. They're not anti-Trump. Oh, what? The New York Post? Who's not anti-Trump? Yeah, it's sorry, Kelly is works on the show, and she's behind the scenes and was messaging me. Yeah, it's just why I don't want to be I mean, this is such basic liberal stuff. You don't have to be a leftist. You don't have to be a radical. You can just be a boring, good old-fashioned lib and quote that apocryphal Voltaire quote. I may not agree with you, but I'll fight to the death to defend your right to say it, right? But no, it's like life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, free speech, free press, unless you say something that we don't like about Joe Biden or his family.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, can't they just be like more subtle about it? I guess they can't. And so Maggie Haberman was attacked. I love when I kind of do like watching them attack each other, but Maggie Haberman.
Yeah, all she did was share the story, and she quoted from it.
She should be fired immediately.
Yeah.
She probably is working for the Russians.
Yeah.
Has she apologized yet?
I'm sure she has. I think she started to backtrack. And for anybody who's not like a diehard liberal, like, how is this going to look that you have this like collective freak out and even direct censorship of a story that is critical of a major party candidate? How is this going to look to anyone who's not already inside the liberal tent? I mean,
yeah.
I think luckily, Trump is so bad that I don't think anything can rescue him at this point. Although, then again, I thought he would lose in 2016. So what do I know?
Right.
But it just looks so ridiculous. And it's a part of a growing thing where there's a real intolerance for anything that offends the sensibilities of, sort of mainstream liberalism, and this reaction to censor it and to block it and to paint anything we don't like as Russian disinformation. It's on a dangerous path. And we've already seen, one big example of how this was used against the left. It's something that was such an obvious outgrowth of Russiagate. When Bernard Sanders was leading in the primary, on the eve of the Nevada caucus, things were looking up for him. We were all excited. Things were looking good. On the eve of the Nevada vote, it gets leaked that the Russians are supporting Bernie Sanders, and they want to boost him because the Russians feel as if boosting Sanders will actually help Trump. And of course, the evidence for this is not disclosed. It's all vague. There's no even specificity as how the Russians are supposed to be helping Bernie Sanders, because it's all made up. It's the equivalent of monsters under the bed. So Russiagate was used to attack Bernie Sanders because, under the guise of opposing Trump, what Russiagate really was protecting the power and privilege of the neoliberals who lost to Trump and whose privilege and power was threatened by Trump's victory and the appeal of an anti-establishment message from Trump, even though Trump was just conning people into believing that he was anti-establishment. But the fact that his message had an appeal and that he won based off of it, that was a threat to the neoliberals. And so they used Russiagate to defend that. And a lot of progressives got duped into going along with it. and thinking it would bring Trump down. And what actually happened is that it not only helped Trump, but at the moment, because, it, as I've said a million times, it distracted everybody from Trump's real crimes and real policies, gave Trump the gift of exoneration. And then not only did it help Trump, but at the point when Bernie Sanders was now threatening the neoliberal centrists, when it came time to elect a new candidate, they used it against Bernie too. And they Russiagated him. And they also used it against Bernie Sanders in the sense that this impeachment thing, which was all about Biden and Ukraine, that also hurt Bernie, because instead of campaigning,
took him away from the trail. Yeah.
Instead of campaigning in Iowa and South Carolina, he had to sit in the Senate gallery and listen to Adam Schiff talk about how we have to fight the Russians over there so we don't fight them over here. So this is how, when progressives and liberals buy into, censorious reactionary politics, it is always used to attack progressives, because this is what it's about. It's not about really principle. It's about protecting the pride and privilege of establishment centrists who can't run on their own merits, on their own policies. They need to use silencing tactics to protect themselves.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I really like, we had this doctor on, Dr. Stephen Reisner, and one of the things we talked about is how masterful Trump is at pointing out other people's hypocrisy. And Reisner argues that he's not actually a hypocrite. Like, he's inconsistent and he's a liar, but he's not a hypocrite, which we didn't fully litigate. And I think we need to actually get into the dictionary of that word. I mean,
I wouldn't take hypocrite off the table for Trump. I think you can.
No, but it wasn't like he wasn't morally validating him. It was just a question of whether or not I mean, he says does he apply? Like, when he says that, when he goes after Hillary, he's almost not ideological enough to be a hypocrite, because anyway, we can get a linguist on. We can have Noam Chomsky on. That's what everyone wants to hear him talk about. The definition of hypocrisy. No, but I mean, this is what, look, Russiagate played into his hands, although it did a terrible thing to the country and the world. This is playing into his hands because one of his big lines, that the media is biased and hates him.
Yeah.
If you are someone who doesn't already hate Trump, or I already hate Trump, and I still think this is bullshit, but if you are somebody who doesn't already hate Trump, and you see this is like such good free PR. A story about the story of how a news story was literally could not be shared on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, if this were any other country, this would be part of the information war that happens in other countries.
Yep.
How do you think it happened? Do we have any idea?
Sorry?
I wonder how it happened. Do you have any idea how this happened?
Well, Democrats started freaking out about this online, and, reflexively, they started calling this, the result of possibly Russian hacking, which is what they do. I mean, anything that threatens the neoliberal consensus is just Russian. That's just Russian talking points, always. And so just reflexively, that was a response to this, that, okay, Hunter Biden's emails came out. It might have come from Russia. We don't know if it came from Russia, but it might have come from Russia, so we need to silence it. And Facebook, immediately got on board, and Facebook said that they would not, that they would be downgrading the story and then preventing people from sharing it. And then Twitter got on board, and it was just a mob. I mean, this is just how it works. It's
so disgusting.
Yeah. And look, it's like today. I mean, look, it might not seem to be that big a deal to people, because people, understandably, everyone's focus is just on defeating Trump. I assume, at least for this audience, that's
there's divide in my audience. We got Chris Hedges making that the counter argument, but yes.
Okay, well, for myself, I'm sympathetic to those who are just really want Trump to lose. And I share that view. So I understand that this might not seem like that big a deal right now, because the most important thing is that Trump loses. But the thing is, I mean, if you don't want to be a hypocrite, you have to apply to yourself the same standards that you apply to others. And certainly we wouldn't want our own articles to be prevented from being shared. So we can't say that about even if it helps the right. And especially, I mean, just tactically, as we talked about, suppressing it helps the right, because it gives them some validity. They could point legitimately to censorship. So why would we, on tactical and principle grounds, support this? And I just hope it's not another Democratic Party blunder that ends up providing Trump a gift after so many over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I know. Wouldn't it be funny? What if this actually pushes him back over the edge? Some guy wrote here. I'm going to go back into my. Wouldn't that be hilarious? I mean, I could almost see it happening. He's so good at that, and the Dems are so dumb, and the media is so bad. Again, I mean, he's just going to say he's going to call out the free speech hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Like he's going to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Very rude. It was very rude. I just wanted to get to the truth. The New York Post just doing its job. They want to get to the truth about Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
You don't have free speech anymore in this country. That's the radical left for you, and it doesn't have to make any sense. Let me just show you. Let's see. Let's see what happened. I'm just gonna do it. I don't usually do this, but let's do it. Oh, it's showing. Is it showing? Is it sharing? Oh no. Yes. Okay.
I don't see it.
Sorry. Chrome tab. 1 second. This is sometimes. Okay, let's just do this. All right. So I just got an interesting response to this. Can you guys see this now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So what the fuck kind of Russian agent can post what they want on Twitter? No wonder you lost the Cold War. I don't even know who he's talking about. Twitter says they have a policy against posting personal information like Poe's email address. So if New York Post just makes a few redactions, the article should fly on Twitter. Right, Jack?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Replying to see if this reply will show up on your feed during your live stream. Yes, it did. Twitter is helping Trump more by doing this, to be honest. Yep, I agree.
Yep.
What else? My retweet is still up from earlier. I've had enough. I've already decided I'm riding with Biden after these vicious attacks of the right wing. Fake news. Who's with me? Yeah, I mean, I would write in either. I'm tempted to write in Hunter Biden or Hillary Clinton. A bad and racist paper, but this is not good. Yeah, it's not that hard. Really not that hard. Thank you, though. I appreciate that the honesty there. And we should really tally up all the things that the media has gotten wrong just in the past week. Yeah, I agree with that. Just wait until. Yeah. Oh, good. That's it. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. All right. Just wait until Biden wins and we try to challenge him from the left and Twitter runs interference to shut down any negative discussion of him. Oh my God. Yeah. This is really going to suck. Yeah. Someone wrote something about how it was, how it had false information. Another word people love is problematic. The metadata stamps on the hard drive are problematic.
Okay. Well, so if that's the case, then make that case. But, look, but the problem with that is the Biden team is not denying the authenticity of these emails. Get your talking points in order, people. Yeah, they have not said, so I'm sorry, these emails, I think, are real. And if they were false, Biden would have a field day with this and say that these are all forgeries, but they're not.
Yeah, they're not, sadly.
From what we know so far, they're not. And,
it just, I mean, it is like, I can't believe that they're doing this. I can't believe that Twitter and Facebook are going along with this. It's just such a bad look. And I think there's some good people whose hearts are in the right place, but they don't get that, like, morality and ethics aside, on a strategic level, like, the first people to suffer from this stuff, I sound like a broken record, are Palestinians, critics of Israel. Those are the first people.
Of course.
Yes. And so it doesn't even work. Like, even if you want to have a good political, like, be a good ally, or thinking that you're not protecting anyone.
Yeah.
And you're only harming the most marginalized. That I hate when people are like, oh, it's easy to defend free speech when you have privilege. It's like, well, the people who are actually going to be most harmed by these restrictions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, in terms of people's heart being in the right place, I don't blame, average resistance libs for buying into all this, because they were, in their ecosystem, they had no other choice. I blame the Blue Anon cult leaders, the ones
Anon. I like that.
The ones who decided that they were going to, instead of focusing on building a real movement to oppose Trump, to, push back on his actual policies, to organize around issues like that actually affect people's lives, that instead we're going to elevate this Cold War chauvinistic conspiracy theory, Russiagate, as the main way to oppose Trump. As Pelosi said, all roads lead to Putin.
I know. How did you have to say that?
In the process, all these outlets, in the same way that we're seeing now with the censorship of the Hunter Biden story, all these media outlets fell in line and just omitted all the countervailing evidence, all the evidence that undermined the fashionable conspiracy theories about Trump and Russia. And so this blocking of information that goes against the centrist candidate is just the next phase of that. I mean, they're used to this now, to censorship. This is just the most blatant that we've seen so far. But it's a natural. It follows naturally from literally excluding any dissenting voice on Russiagate over 4 years and promoting nonstop people who are willing to peddle the propaganda, even though it was completely without merit. And so this is the next phase. And so I wonder, like, what's next? Like, are some of us who don't go along with it, are we going to get shut down? I mean, certainly there's been cases of that on Twitter with accounts being censored and limited. So it's just a crazy time, and it's weird to see the shift in liberal culture since Trump. It's been a real weird shift.
Assange, I mean, Snowden, again, these are the same people who love Daniel Ellsberg.
That's right.
But somehow
That's right.
And I just wanted to, this is not as related, but I couldn't help but share this because it's since we were just talking about bad arguments to make and how they get their talking points in order, and like even Biden people aren't saying it was a problematic timestamp. Also, let's ban that fucking word, problematic. Okay. So speaking of bad arguments, so Brianna Joy Gray, major friend of the show, tweeted she's mad at people because rightly so a lot of people have been very critical of an argument that she got into with the great professor Noam Chomsky, which I'm not going to get into the argument. I think both sides have good things to say. We can talk about it, but that's not the point. Like, everyone is free. You should disagree with people, but some people have been kind of rude in the way that they're disagreeing. And I encourage everyone to listen to that whole Patreon only episode because Brianna is actually extremely polite. And they just clipped like a part that's particularly antagonistic. But so she tweets something out about this, trying to imagine a world where, because I disagree with she meant colleague, I would patronize them by saying I don't think they understand how primaries work. And she gets into it back and forth, and then someone, I guess, says she doesn't understand the role of courts, and then she puts that she went to Harvard Law School. And someone wrote, hold on. Where is it? Damn it. Well, I just had it. It was someone who literally asked Brianna Joy Gray, a woman whose name was Women for Biden or something. And they asked her where she had graduated in her class in law school, which is, okay, first of all, people don't do that anymore. That's not how you, you just pass fail at Harvard Law, apparently. But why, if you're a supporter of Biden, would you ever bring up where someone ranks in their class, given that he was 70 something out of 80 something at Syracuse Law and lied about it?
I mean,
it's like I can write. These people should pay me.
Yeah,
they should pay me, and I'll write better anti-Bree stuff for them.
Yeah. Well, consistent standards from that wing. I mean, it's like every time I see a mean Biden person or whatever online, I remember the Bernie Bros. You remember that, the Bernie Bros? Yeah,
of course.
It's it's really funny. It's really, and Bree is this, why is she attacked? She's attacked because she refuses to accept that a major political party in 2020 can't bring itself to advocate for free healthcare for everybody,
right?
And other minimal, social democratic policies that are, that are normal everywhere else. And so Bree stands up for that. She wants the Democrats to actually win with policies that could appeal to people, and she gets viciously attacked. It's really, you just have to marvel at it.
Yeah, and also they're all things that people like, so they're all popular things.
Yeah.
And yes, as someone points out, there all these libs who hate Chomsky are now waving the Chomsky flag.
Yeah, and I mean, I have my opinions on that. I don't like. I mean,
Well, it's opportunistic, obviously.
it is, and Chomsky's. I just think
them.
he gets misinterpreted a lot. He's not saying vote for Biden, everything will be great.
Yeah.
He's saying that he would rather. I mean, he's always going to be challenging the government. So would you rather be challenging a centrist candidate who is not as horrible on some key things like the environment, nuclear weapons, the Iran nuclear deal? You can go on down the list, food stamps. Or would you rather be challenging a far-right candidate who doesn't pay attention to anybody? His only constituency is a very narrow sector of corporate power, and who has policies that threaten, the extinction of the human species. So for Noam, it's a pretty easy choice because we're not voting for who reflects our soul. We're voting for between two choices on election day. So why, if you're trying to work for a better world, would you not want to pick the candidate that is slightly, or or even in some ways actually significantly less repressive and awful? And that's not to excuse anything Biden's done in his career.
Right.
And the people, I mean, he has awful people around him, and I actually have nothing really positive to say about them except the fact that they're not the Trump regime. But I would much rather be challenging a Biden who is, not the slick operator that Obama was. Obama could convince people that he was like woke and was progressive, and really he wasn't, because he was a good politician. He could fool people. Biden doesn't have those skills, so he'll actually be vulnerable. And if we care about politics, it's about much more than voting on one day every 4 years. It's about organizing. And
well,
so
sorry, I cut you off.
No.
My big hope is that there's going to be an expectation gap of having people seeing that Sanders fought for these things, and that these things aren't fringe, and that there's going to be people are going to demand these things. I mean, I know everyone's going to call me naive and an idiot, and that I have Bernie glasses. I see the world through Bernie tinted glasses, but we'll see. I actually wanted to. I'm going to take some questions, but here's what it was. Where in your class did you graduate? Pennsylvania woman for Biden. Again, I don't know why you'd want to bring that up. And he was 76 in the law school class of 85. So I want to bring up, actually, I didn't plan this, but I actually clipped I had an interview with Michael Moore, and I cited how Cornel West presents this election as a fight between, a choice between a neoliberal and a neo-fascist, and how and Cornel West is like, you got to go with the neoliberal just because he's less dangerous. And so I remembered that something my late uncle said. So I just want to play this because I think it's nice to, let's see, hold on, I'm not sharing the screen yet, right? My uncle was very cool, and he was a labor organizer. He has a really cool bio, but let me just show you. For some reason, this thing is not. And he died the February after Trump was elected, actually. And I really wish, as you'll see, I really wish that, as I say to Michael Moore, I really wish I had recorded more with him. But here, let me just show this. Okay. So here's and this relates to what we were talking about. Okay. And you'll see at the end, my mom and my aunt make an appearance at the end of this, a very short one. Okay, can you hear this?
Right?
Yeah.
Can you hear? Okay. I can just forward it to I'll just forward it. I'll just skip to where my uncle starts talking. No, actually kind of nice.
Look, guys, let's see. Thank you so much for coming.
Is that
on
too
the
loud?
show. So excited to talk to you.
No, I'm just trying to get my.
Oh, sure, yeah. Everyone should listen to Michael's podcast, Rumble. It's really good. And make sure you listen to the first episode because it has all these gems about his youth and how he would do Irish dancing.
It's true.
And drive his family crazy, and got a huge tape recorder, right?
Yes, actually, I have it here in my. See it.
Look, guys. Let's see.
But this was given to me in 4th grade. Can you see it up there on the top shelf?
Tape recorder.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's a reel-to-reel tape recorder given to me at Christmas of 4th grade, and I just started recording everything. My grandparents reciting poetry, and and telling me what they thought about life. And it's
Yeah, I wish I had done more of that with my grandparents.
yeah, I know, because the thing is, once they're gone,
I know.
they are actually gone.
I know. My
So-
uncle was so amazing. And in fact, I have to find this clip. And he was like such a New York secular Jew communist.
He really was.
And I actually got him right before he died in February of 2017, right? February 2017. If it was after Trump was elected, so yeah, that would have been right. And I got him that summer, saying like, yeah, we got to vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a neoliberal, but they are better than neo-fascists, which is the Cornel West line.
We've always had two different tendencies in American history: bourgeois democracy and more open fascism. And they have either one, ruling class, the powers that be, have either tool to use against to govern and control the people and to continue to make their profits. Anytime the people organized and won victories, the left movement grew. It never grew during periods of repression, of jailings, of murder, of Palmer raids, of McCarthyism. It was smashed. People went to jail. People were afraid, and unionization. Union drives were broken up by vigilantes, and workers' leaders were killed. We never won by things getting worse. So anyone who thinks that should take a good look at Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and fascist Spain. Workers lost big time during all of the fascistic right-wing open seizures of power. And Donald Trump is the same kind of chump clown that Mussolini and Hitler started out of, marginalized, until the big money backed them because they needed a distraction from revolution that was beginning to emerge in the workers' movements. I don't say it's an exact replica, an exact facsimile, but there are some lessons to be learned. It's very important to fight neo-fascism and Trump and racism. They're pulling out racism. You're going to see open anti-Semitism again soon, which they already have started to do in some working class neighborhoods.
Voter suppression is the big thing.
That's my aunt.
The voter suppression all over.
Is an obvious big
So that guy is
affording contraception.
the guy is my mom's
the most
brother.
basic democratic right. They just declared the right of corporations to use their money to distort the elections, to give huge contributions and dominate and buy candidates and laws with outfits like ALEC, the Citizens United decision. And at the same time, they declare that legal in this rigged Supreme Court that Bush put in. They start to attack and subvert the people's right to vote with voter suppression. And these are dangerous times. You are not going to build any kind of left movement with working class power if the neo-fascists get in. You're going to jails eventually. You want to build that kind of movement, beat back fascism, and then fight for a further left-wing swing and for a real people's agenda, or fight for it at the same time. But you have to beat Trump in this election. And any person who considers themselves left or progressive and doesn't realize that, then your finger is so far up, then you cannot get it out anymore. Suction has taken hold.
He always has to have the vulgarity in there.
Anyway, so
I totally agree. And listen, the problem is I sympathize 100% emotionally with people who have a hard time voting for Biden. I'll be honest, a part of me wants to see Biden lose, the emotional part of me, the ego part of me, because I'm so angry that they wasted 4 years of Trump on Russiagate. I don't like their policies. I think they're complicit in all the horrors of the world and this country as well. So they don't deserve to win, and they deserve to be defeated. But that's the emotional part. We have to think about our actual moral part and what we want to see in the world. And helping Trump win again is means that the world's most vulnerable will be the worst impact. The smallest differences between the world's most powerful make a huge difference for the world's most vulnerable. And look, Trump is ramping up murderous sanctions on Iran, possibly leading to war unless there's a way to de-escalate and return to the Iran nuclear deal, murderous sanctions on Venezuela and Syria. He's tearing up the last remaining nuclear treaty that limits the nuclear weapons arsenals of both the US and Russia. His policies on climate change, when we all know how awful that is. And Biden, on all these issues, is, in some cases, he's as bad. Like in Venezuela, he'll probably try to continue what Trump is doing. But in other cases, he's not as bad. And regardless, if we can get organized, there's at least a chance that we could reverse some of the harm, even if Biden continues a lot of the Trump policies. Under Trump, there's no chance. This is like a far-right reactionary movement that he is ahead of, and there's no chance of anything positive happening. Sometimes he talks about the military-industrial complex, or he talks about withdrawing from foreign wars. He's not going to do anything. He has no real power. Every time he's tried to go act on his impulses of like pulling out of, say, Syria, the military-industrial complex tells him what to do, and he backs down because he has no political movement behind him. He has no force. He has a very narrow constituency of Sheldon Adelson and that guy Mercer and other far-right billionaires. So there's no hope of anything positive happening under Trump. And people thinking that somehow Trump winning again will help give rise to a progressive movement. Well, look, what happened in 2016? The centrists didn't go away. They don't leave just because they lose an election. They actually did everything they could to hold on to power, and they won. They succeeded. So if anything, the argument that like somehow Trump's victory could lead to the rise of a progressive movement is undermined by the very clear example of the last election, where the centrists, Bernie Sanders didn't do really any better in 2020 than he did in 2016. You actually could argue he did worse because this time he had 4 years to prepare and he had a massive organizing arm. It didn't work. So, I just don't subscribe to this idea that we should help Trump win because maybe it would help give rise to something better in 4 years. I just don't think it works like that. And I don't think it's worth that possibility is worth the very, predictable and guaranteed costs of 4 more years of Trump.
Right.
I don't see anything positive. And I hope people, as hard as it is emotionally to accept, I hope people can think about that.
Yeah. And guys, stop being such snowflakes in the chat. No one's vote shaming you. I'm not shilling for Biden. I think I'm allowed to show this thing of my uncle and some total idiot who I guess, I don't know, I'm not going to ban you because I don't believe in banning. And I also would like to play this game where I respond to my trolls when they're assholes if they pay me. But someone was like, I'm not going to, that guy is out of touch, that boomer living off of welfare that I pay. Like, first of all, he's not alive, which I mentioned, and you're a very bad person and stupid. This is how I raise a lot of money from my super chats. And second of all, what is this welfare discourse? Why are you shaming? What, are you a reactionary or what? Oh, you probably are a reactionary. That's why you actually support Biden. You see, he just made the counter argument to you, Aaron, which is showing us what a fucking Republican Biden is. Anyway, oh no, he doesn't support Biden, so forget that. Anyway, also, I had Chris Hedges on. Just give everyone a break, okay? All right. Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm going to take a question. Aaron, is it possible that Pompeo released Hillary's email in exchange for regime change wars or intervention from Trump, whom he continues to fool? Well,
I don't think Trump needs to be fooled. I think he doesn't have any real convictions. He has a sense of what the electorate wants. So in 2016. He very skillfully portrayed himself as like a champion of the working man, and he claimed to be against foreign wars. But it was a con. He doesn't actually believe this stuff. He said it because he knew it would test well, and it did. It helped him win. But he doesn't actually believe it. And he has no organizing force to give him the political capital to do anything because, no one in his administration is anti-war, is going to, or is going to fight for factories like he pledged to do, or is going to give everybody health care as he keeps pledging to do. So it doesn't matter what he says, even though what he says pisses off centrists, because he reveals sometimes the true face of the U.S. empire. Like he'll talk sometimes about there being a military-industrial complex, and I enjoy that. It's funny when he says that, and it's funny to see how mad centrists get when he says the truth, but. Politically, it doesn't mean anything beyond just his talk. He doesn't do anything because he has no actual power. He has no conviction. And every single time he goes along with Mike Pompeo and everybody else. That's why he keeps appointing these awful people to top positions like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo or John Bolton, his national security advisor. It's all talk. Anything he does, anything he says that can be construed as positive is just entirely talk. So I don't think Pompeo needs to really do much to convince Trump to do anything because he just goes along with whatever they do, and that's why you go over country after country. He's committing regime change in. He's trying to commit regime change in Venezuela, in Iran, in Syria, with murderous sanctions that are denying people food and medicine. And under Biden, there's a chance of reversing that, at least in the case of Iran. And I think if politically people could be organized, you could do it in the case of Syria and Venezuela too. Under Trump, there's no chance of that, especially with Democrats. They don't really care about that as an issue. And so, all the energy is spent resisting the far right onslaught. There's not much space for like organizing for positive things and for trying to get Biden, when he puts forward a healthcare plan, to make it better. Like this time, except not letting them get away with taking away a public option. But under Trump, there's no hope of anything. Like what are we organized for? All we're organizing for is against the worst Trump policies. But even so much of that energy is diluted by Democrats sucking up energy to keep themselves in power and keep themselves relevant.
Yeah. Well, Johnny Turnbull says, what do you two think about vote pairing? Can't we support third parties and defeat fascism if we vote tactically? Actually, I had on Sami Husseini, from FAIR, what was the project? I had him on the same day I had on Jim Zogby and Mike Duncan, and he had a voting project where you do exactly that, and I will put that into the link. Thank you, SM. Katie, your uncle gave me goosebumps. He saw it coming. That's wisdom, and now it's here. I love your work. Thanks. So, what do you know about that vote pairing thing?
You make a pact with someone else, like you're going to vote for one person that they support, and in return, they're going to vote against Trump or something.
Yeah, I should know about this more because not against Trump. It's like, wait, is it against? I really should know. My head isn't in that space right now. That's a very good hippy dippy way of me to say.
What I know is that if you're voting, if you're not voting for Biden, especially in a swing state, then you're voting to help Trump. Then you're helping Trump win. You are, and people should think about that. Not that anybody in a swing state who would be susceptible to changing their mind will probably care what I think, but I just think leftists should think about this generally. Like, that's the question. Unfortunately, I wish we had other questions. I wish this was a referendum on the Democrats and neoliberals and their competence, but it's not. The question is, do we want Donald Trump to be in office for another 4 years? That's the question that's going to be answered on Election Day.
Yeah. Let's see. And then just some more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you. And if you have any more questions for Aaron, please put them in. I'm not going to, don't worry. Won't keep you here all night. Okay. Some Vashon Dog Boy wanted to know how many other posts have been censored so far. Democracy writes, Katie, Aaron, have you seen Keith Olbermann new YouTube video? No, I actually haven't. Then there's the thing we already read about arguments for keeping any of these international institutions. Sam K writes, thank you, Aaron, for your courage at the UN Security Council. Hopefully you will have a live chat on the Gray Zone about this, as I'm sure people will have more questions about this topic. Thank you, Katie, for having him on. Yeah, we should live stream it. Blake writes, I'm a little confused on Iraq and WMDs. Didn't Iraq use chemical weapons in the war against Iran in 1988? Wouldn't that mean they still had them in 2000?
Well, yeah, that's right. They used them after the Reagan administration and Bush administration, the first George Bush administration, George H.W. Bush, gave Iraq chemical weapons, and they used that against Iran and the Kurds inside Iraq. But by that point, a lot of these stockpiles had been destroyed, and Iraq had given up its WMD program, as the weapons inspectors who went into Iraq later on confirmed. But that got inconvenienced when the U.S. started using the UN weapons inspectors to spy on Iraq, which got them kicked out. And then the U.S. also bombed Iraq and multiple times during the Clinton years, and also imposed murderous sanctions on Iraq, which then made the inspections more difficult, culminating with the chemical weapons. I mean, it's true in 2002 they probably did have some chemical weapons, but to chemical weapons that could possibly be a threat to the United States, as we were hearing about constantly, that, you know, that the smoking gun would come in the form of a mushroom cloud. I mean, all that was just ridiculous.
Oh my God, please don't impugn her integrity. That's what Condoleezza Rice said when she was asked about that. And then some other really good, let's see. Sparky says, will the establishment have less power over Biden? Russian Gator says, Aaron and Katie are Russian agents. Only Maté article should be allowed on Facebook. It's true.
Let me answer that one, Katie. The establishment will have total power over Biden. Of course they will. I'm not denying that. Of course they will. But the thing is, we, under Biden, will have more space to possibly push for something positive, or at least something way less harmful than we were under Donald Trump, where the establishment, the far right element of the establishment, also controls Trump, and there's no space for anything. And there's movement towards horrible policies that not even Biden would do, as horrible as Biden is. Like, for example, tearing up the New START treaty, as Trump is doing right now, the last treaty that limits the nuclear arsenals of both countries. It doesn't get any attention for some crazy reason. I think the reason is because it undermines the narrative that Trump and Putin are in cahoots.
Right, our boyfriends. Yeah.
The policies like this are literally threatening the survival of the planet. And this is why Russia has said that Russia is basically cheering for Biden, because Biden would extend this New START treaty, which expires in February. And Putin spoke about the election recently, and he noted that Biden supports New START, and Trump does it, and he says we're really hoping to be able to extend New START.
Right.
And actually, funny, Russia today actually called off talks with the U.S. because they said we're not going to deliver a agreement before the election, because if the Trump administration wants to be able to tell people that they've reached some agreement with us, sorry, it's not going to happen. So it looks to me like, ironically, Russia is openly interfering or cheering for Biden. I think.
Oh my God, we're going to have to oppose Biden if he wins. It's going to be because of Russian intervention.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now it's for the cause of avoiding nuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually good.
Imagine if Dems were ever mad at Trump for that.
Yes, exactly.
Or serious stuff, but no, they have to only choose the most form procedure based thing. Or anyway, Aaron and Kate, Russia Gator. Aaron and Katie are Russian agents. Only Maté article should be allowed on Facebook. Sports Dropping says the GOP has been voter suppressing since 2000 and ramped it up with cross-check from 2013 on, yet the media ignored it until now. And then Shiguire says, Michael Moore, the original video recorder of life. Masha E says, no need to be sorry for Bernie tinted glasses. Thank you. Brian S says, no, when both candidates are so horrible and the system so corrupt, you vote third party. Fantamos Fanto says, you need a blue Anon shirt and merch. True. And then this is an interesting question. Stephanie Welch says, Aaron, I've tried for years to get friends to understand what a scam Russiagate is, to no avail. Do you have your top 3 pieces of evidence to help make the case? CrowdStrike, no convictions, etc.
Okay, question. Top 3. I'll try to be quick. The core allegation that Russia stole the Democratic Party emails, it's generated by a private cybersecurity firm known as CrowdStrike with multiple conflicts of interest, including a co-founder who works or who was a fellow at the Atlantic Council, which is a NATO lobby. We later find out that in December 2017, the CrowdStrike president, Sean Henry, admitted that they actually had no evidence that any of the emails that they said were stolen by Russia were actually exfiltrated from the server. This was kept under wraps until only a few months ago. So we have a Democratic Party, NATO-aligned private firm generating the core allegation that Russia stole the emails. And we have a whole bunch of inconsistencies with Mueller's timeline when he later backs up that allegation, including the fact that Julian Assange said that he had the Democratic Party emails. And only after that, that's when Mueller says that Julian Assange first makes contact with Guccifer 2.0, this alleged Russian cutout who Mueller suggests might have given Assange the emails, although Mueller also admits he doesn't even know how Assange got them. So in short, we have all these holes with the core email theft allegation. Then you have the collusion allegation. It's generated by another Democratic Party contractor, Fusion GPS, by hiring this former British spy, Christopher Steele. No one is charged for conspiring in a Russian plot from the Trump campaign. There's not a single charge. There's never even an allegation made. There's just all this constant innuendo that never pans out and that is undermined every single time when the evidence comes out. And the third front is this alleged Russian social media operation where supposedly, these sophisticated Russian Facebook ads duped enough voters into either not voting for St. Hillary Clinton or got them to vote for Trump. Then you look at the actual ads, and most of them have nothing to do with the election. Most of them aired after the election. There's things like, like Jesus masturbation hotline ads and, Yosemite Sam memes and all this stupid stuff. And, the Russians spend, like this Russian social media firm spends no money on it. And Mueller, after trying to suggest that this was a part of a Russian government operation, also admits in court that the social media firm, this troll farm, the IRA, has no ties to the Russian government, or at least they don't have any evidence of Russian government ties. And ultimately, they dropped the case when the Russian troll farm challenges it in court. So, and by the way, the Russian social media thing, that was also generated by Democrats. They were the first ones to bring this idea that this Russian social media operation had duped Americans. They actually spread that theory to Congress, which then went to Facebook. And under pressure from Congress, Facebook then came up with these ads and said that, oh my God, this was this huge propaganda operation. So in every single core plank of Russiagate, you have partisan interests and a whole bunch of countervailing evidence that unfortunately was kept from the public to keep this, 4-year-long propaganda campaign going.
Yeah. And I want to make sure, though, I don't think you did the damage of these things. I don't think you do the damage of these memes justice. So I just want to make sure people see how powerful they are. Here's one of the pieces of propaganda that definitely convinced people to vote for Donald Trump. Can you guys see this? Christian mothers against masturbation. Message is always clear with Christ. Put your hand in faith and not in your pants. Are you addicted to masturbation? Reach out to me and we can beat it together.
Yeah, that's how
Jesus.
Trump won. That's how Trump won. And that's how Hillary Clinton, with a straight face, said that the Russians convinced black people not to vote for her in Michigan. She actually said that.
Yeah, and probably she knew that they do that in Wisconsin, so she's like, I'm not even going to go there because it's a waste.
Exactly. Oh, yes. She had no chance against the Russians in Wisconsin, so why even go there?
Yeah. That's a great question, actually, and I always want to know stuff like that. Let's see. Five Eyes, Neolibs, Neocons, and MIC are on the same team. Okay, nice. Some insight from Sparky. Aaron, at some point I thought I heard you say you were writing a book on Russiagate. That's still in the works? Good question.
Yeah, I'm trying. You'd be surprised. There's not a lot of publishers who are jumping at the chance to publish my perspective on this, even though I have to say, immodestly, I've gotten everything right, and so many people have got it wrong. But it's just liberal culture has been so identified with believing in Russiagate, believing that the reason we got Donald Trump is because of Russia, and that the answer to Trump was that Mueller was going to uncover this conspiracy plot. And when Mueller failed, it was Mueller's fault because he didn't look hard enough. And that's just like a very powerful orthodoxy that has just been entrenched in liberal culture. So like when I met with a publisher once of an established publisher, she said, I like your book, but if I publish this, my friends will be really mad at me. And it was on that basis that, she turned it down, which I thought was just so sad. Like this is a grounds to get, this is grounds not to publish a book is because your friends will be mad at you. But, so anyway, I'm hoping to still do it. And, I just haven't gotten around to working on it recently, but I'll try because there's a lot to say about it.
Yeah. Someone said, I love you and your dad. Now I can't find it.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll stay on for a little bit more. I feel like, Aaron, is there anything you want to say about, Max already said this, but you can also do this another time if you want to take like more time to do it. But do you want to say anything about Stephen Cohen?
Well, yeah, that is just, I'm still processing that loss. It's incalculable, his loss. Stephen Cohen is one of this country's top Russia scholars ever. He changed the way we understand Soviet history. And, just right there, I mean, his importance just can't be stressed enough. But then you take it to the more modern period where, in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia had a real opportunity to, liberalize, engage in, a genuine social democracy. But the U.S. came in and helped impose this radical neoliberal system that created the oligarchs, that saw state industries get pillaged and destroyed, and saw life expectancy plummet, poverty skyrocket because of these shock reforms imposed by the U.S. And Stephen Cohen spoke out against this. And at that point, he started falling out of favor with the U.S. establishment. For years, he had been an analyst on CBS News. He covered Cold War summits with Dan Rather, and he was everywhere. And he was at the peak of the academy. He was a professor emeritus at at Princeton and NYU. But when he started really, criticizing U.S. foreign policy and the pillaging of Russia, which then continues into the, really escalates in 2014 when the U.S. escalates this coup in Ukraine because they're trying to bring Ukraine essentially into NATO, into the Western orbit. And Russia pushes back on that because this is on Russia's borders, and Russia doesn't want a NATO state on its borders. And Stephen Cohen pointed out that basically Russia was acting rationally in its interests. But because imperial dogma was so powerful in Washington and in the media, they couldn't tolerate his dissent. They couldn't tolerate someone questioning our right to go in, overthrow a government, and start a proxy war with Russia on its borders. So ever since then, Stephen Cohen was demonized. But what was so cool about him is that, it was uncomfortable because he was used to being, in the academy and treated with a lot of reverence from establishment circles. But ultimately, he decided not to care, and he stuck to principle. And he was just so skilled at destroying the propaganda that was used to justify a new Cold War with Russia. And he did it with such grace and poise, and he was so generous. He shared with anybody who was willing to listen his wisdom. And I got to know him over the last few years because I first, became familiar with him at Democracy Now! Because I worked there for over a decade, and we interviewed him all the time. And then I left and in early 2017, I started working at this outlet called The Real News. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Stephen Cohen had become so marginalized and attacked. And at that point, Russiagate was now this whole thing. And so many parts of the left, unfortunately, including Democracy Now!, fell for it. And so Stephen Cohen became not only not welcome in some establishment circles, but even on the left as well. So I benefited from that because here's like this genius scholar who has so much to share. And so I interviewed him constantly. And through that, I got to know him very well. And I learned so much from him. But the problem is no one can ever do it like he can. He's irreplaceable. No one has a mastery of Soviet and now Russian history like he does. And so no one will be able to challenge Cold War dogma like he did. So I just wish, it's an incalculable loss, but he's inspired a lot of people, including me, and we'll try to, honor his legacy by doing the best we can. But the thing is, we can't. Like no one, it's an irreplaceable loss. But he's, luckily he's inspired a lot of us, and he's left us a lot of books to read and material, things to think about, ways to think about Russia that were not otherwise expressed. And so, I will try to continue his legacy in the best way that I can and honor him. And I'll be doing more soon on him on my show Pushback. But it's just a huge loss.
But it's really nice that you talked to him, recorded so much with him, it is a huge loss, but it's a nice feeling when you have helped maintain someone's legacy.
Well, we can't do his legacy justice because he was on another level. But, yes, we're lucky that he was here with us during the time that he was. forgotten, and his impact will continue because he stands just for a certain like intellectual maturity and commitment and discipline, and being willing to withstand dumb smear attacks that people launch against you when they can't fight you on the facts. And that's inspiring. And it's the problem is every day there's something where I'm like, fuck, I wish Stephen Cohen was here so I could ask him about this. What would his response be? And there's clips of him. He was sometimes allowed back on cable news, especially on CNN. CNN brought him back on to have debates with people. And there's one where he destroys Max Boot. It's so funny. People should watch it. But we'll never have that. There'll never be someone in that establishment circle at his level, with his level of expertise, who will ever be allowed back in like that. 'Cause they just won't tolerate it. They won't tolerate a dissenter as brilliant as he is inside the high perches of the academy and intellectual culture. They just won't. So he was one of a kind, and he was also just a great guy. He was really funny, and really special.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and it's like there's also this wealth of knowledge. Like you want to hear their take. I mean, I feel like this a lot with my uncle. He was just like, he was not a professor, but he read all the time. I remember he was like, "This is a really great book, but it's crippled by its anti-Stalinism." That was one of his reviews about some Spanish Civil War book. But it's like it's just. But it is, again, I'm not downplaying it at all or trivializing it. It is a huge loss, and he was mistreated. But it's really nice that there are books that he wrote. There's interviews, and you helped do that. Like you helped.
I interviewed him as much as I could. I couldn't believe my fortune.
I wanted to. I kept saying I was going to. Yeah.
I could honestly that he was being marginalized even by Democracy Now. I mean, that's a reflection of how to the right our culture, our media culture has shifted. That even DN couldn't tolerate him pushing back on Russiagate, and he was also pushing back on the Syrian proxy war. Because everyone's thinking just went crazy because of Russia stuff. It warped everyone's point of view, and he was a victim of that. So, but I was like, this is Stephen Cohen, who's like he's a master, and so I interviewed him as much as I could, and I got to speak to him a lot, and I benefited a lot. His last book that he published is still very relevant. It's called War with Russia ? It came out about a year and a half ago, and it's very relevant. And it's he goes through a lot of the background that led to Russiagate, including the crisis in Ukraine, the Maidan coup, and he goes through Russiagate as well. And everything he said about Russiagate has completely held up. And in fact, one thing he says is he didn't call it Russiagate; he called it Intelgate, because his whole point was where's Russia in all of this? There's the allegation that Russia is involved, but really Russia is in this because a bunch of intelligence officials brought Russia into this and accused Russia of this masterful sweeping plot, when really all that was an effort on their part to justify their Cold War militarism towards Russia, to undermine cooperation between the US and Russia, and basically just help justify the existence of the national security state, which thrives off of tensions and war with Russia because it helps justify weapons contracts and the funding for think tanks. So Stephen Cohen never called it Russiagate; he called it Intelgate, and I've been meaning actually to do that because Russiagate it's a misnomer. It's actually not Russiagate. It is Intelgate. It was, carried out by Intel officials who disingenuously and deceptively and very dangerously fear-mongered about Russia for their own cynical interests.
Yeah, I sometimes call it Israelgate.
Because,
right? Because the one time that Flynn actually did try to meddle, right, was when he asked the Russian ambassador for Russia to vote against a non-binding resolution condemning Israel's settlements.
Exactly right. The one documented case of collusion between the Trump team and a foreign government is not Russia, but it's Israel. When, after Trump wins, Obama's on his way out. So finally he gets a little bit of courage when it comes to Israel. He's going to not vote for, but he'll abstain on a vote, non-binding vote condemning Israeli settlements So Sheldon Adelson, the Trump donor, and the Israeli government asked the Trump team to sabotage this vote. And they do it. They try really hard. They go out and they lobby countries. They even ask Russia, can you vote against this? And Russia says no, which gives you an indication about whether or not Trump and Russia were in cahoots. So it's funny. The only documented case of collusion is between, when it comes to Trump and a foreign power, is Trump and Israel. But try to find a time when that gets mentioned as a scandal. Is there one Democrat who, even though Trump was trying to undermine their own policy, their own president,
their guy,
were there any hearings about that? Was there any investigation of that? Was there any outrage? No, because support for Israel is bipartisan. So it was just, that collusion didn't matter. In the same way that right now, it was reported that when Trump just imposed new sanctions on Iran, new ways to cut off food and medicine from Iranian children, there was heavy lobbying behind the scenes from the Israeli government, and also this group called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which is effectively an agent of the Israeli government. That's really what it is. That sounds like foreign interference in our democracy, a government trying to tell us to sanction another country in a dangerous way that escalates tensions, that leads to war, and also denies kids of food and medicine. But did Democrats care about that, say anything? No, because, again, support for Israel is bipartisan, and this whole canard about foreign interference, it's completely invented just for cynical political purposes. It's not anything real.
Yeah. I want to make sure I read one thing to you, which was this question I referred to was looking for is, what do you think about Rehova willing to go federal with Assad?
Well, they're not willing to go federal with Assad. That's, so the question is about an area of Syria controlled by the Kurds, protected now by the U.S. military occupation. It's not my area of expertise. You have people on the left who say that, the Kurds should be in alliance with the U.S. because that's the only way to protect them, and otherwise they have to give up, their autonomy to the Syrian government, and Assad is a police state. I'm personally sympathetic to the argument of Ben Norton, my colleague at the Gray Zone, and Max Blumenthal, that, and Josh Landis, actually, the eminent Syria scholar, has made this too, that this idea of relying on the U.S., it's just, I don't accept the right of the U.S. to occupy a foreign country. So right there, it's hard then for me to accept that it's legitimate for the Kurds to hold on to this autonomy on that basis. And also, it's just never going to last. The U.S. always abandons the Kurds every single time, and they will do so here when it's politically expedient. So I sympathize with the Kurds. They've been heavily oppressed by everybody, but I don't give the U.S. the right to occupy a foreign country, especially one that they've destroyed through a murderous proxy war over the last decade. And if we have any obligation to Syria, it's reparations for all the damage that we caused there. So I think ultimately, I do hope that the Kurds can reach some accommodation with the Syrian government, because this idea of relying on the U.S., it's not, I think, there's no principle there that I can get behind. And it's also just not feasible. It's just not going to last.
So let's go out on a bang and watch. Should we watch this short Stephen Cohen Max Boot clip?
Yes.
All right. It's a good way to honor him. And also,
yes.
We got to copy him. We got to just quote him. Okay. Okay, let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
And can you hear it?
I mean, do you
Is that playing audio? Okay, great.
It's problematic that we don't know what was said in that 2+ hour meeting between these two world leaders, and as Max said, it didn't seem like Mike Pompeo or others maybe even have a firm grasp on what was said.
I don't think it's unusual. We do have a pretty good sense of what was discussed, both from what Trump's people have said, but equally from 2 or 3 speeches Putin has given. Let me just rattle them off, because I was looking at them today. They discussed trying to avoid a new nuclear race by keeping alive 2 treaties that exist. They talked about in Syria, including securing Israeli borders from Iranian forces. That would be very important to Americans, I think. They talked about the possibility of a joint alliance against terrorists who are in pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. They talked about doing more business, which doesn't make much sense because of the sanctions. And they talked in some way about the United States becoming more involved in the Minsk agreement, which is the only agreement we have to resolve the Ukrainian crisis.
But how do you know that's what they actually talked about?
Those are good things.
You have to take Putin's word for this. This is what they talked
the
about.
Russian side has said.
Right. So you're going on the side. You're believing Vladimir Putin on this.
Well, I don't want to shock you, but I believe Vladimir Putin on several things. But the point is this has been confirmed by a number of Trump's people. Trump himself made some statements. We discussed this.
It hasn't really been confirmed. I mean,
he doesn't talk like a normal diplomat.
What President Trump actually said to Vladimir Putin is only known to Vladimir Putin and to President Trump. Even if Putin comes forward and says, "Oh, I said this," or even if President Trump comes forward and says, "Oh, I said this," we don't know for sure. The only thing we know for sure is what happened in that press conference. Did what happened in that press conference concern you at all, Stephen?
Well, let me give you an example. I being older than both of you, maybe you don't remember. In early 1986, President Ronald Reagan met alone with then Soviet leader Gorbachev for I think about 2.5 hours. And everybody was very upset about it because Reagan was getting older in years, and people were worried. When the guys came out, Reagan and Gorbachev, they said, "We've decided to abolish nuclear weapons." And aides on both sides said, "You can't do that," just like that. So they backed off. But what happened 1 year later? Reagan and Gorbachev abolished a whole category of nuclear weapons, the intermediate range. So good things got done, and nobody else knew except the two translators what was said in there. So there's precedent.
President Trump today talked about meeting with the Iranian president, Rouhani, with no preconditions. Does that surprise you? Would that be wise?
It's not surprising to me at all, Anderson. In fact, I predicted it a week ago when Trump came out with that semi-deranged tweet in all capital letters threatening consequences the likes of which you've never seen before to Iran. Based on his pattern, you can pretty easily predict that after threatening these horrible consequences, Trump will then try to set up a meeting, glad hand, and before long, he'll probably be praising Rouhani for being incredibly intelligent, smart, witty, warm, and reaching a deal that has no substance to it whatsoever. That's his pattern. The striking thing to me is that although he's willing to threaten North Korea, he's willing to threaten Iran, he never threatens Russia. And that's why a lot of intelligence officials think that there is something highly suspect in the relationship between Putin and Trump.
I have no idea what Mr. Buddha is talking about. He wants Trump to threaten Russia.
Yeah, this is.
Why would we threaten Russia? You've got two nuclear
because
superpowers.
they're attacking us.
And
Russia is attacking us, Professor Cohen. Russia is attacking us right now, according to Trump's own director of national intelligence.
Russia. I've been studying Russia for 45 years. I've lived in Russia and I've lived here.
And you've been consistently an apologist for Russia in those 45 years.
Russia hasn't. Excuse me. What did you say to me?
I said you've been consistently an apologist for Russia in
please.
those last 45 years.
All right, I don't do defamation of people. I do serious analysis of serious national security problems. When people like you call people like me, and not only me, but people more eminent than me, apologists for Russia, because we don't agree with your analysis, you are criminalizing diplomacy and détente, and you are the threat to American national security in the story. Why do you have to defame somebody you don't agree with it? They used to do that in the old Soviet Union. We don't do that here. Well, we used to, but we need to stop it.
So just finally, Stephen, you're saying Russia was not attacking the United States?
I know what you're talking about. That during the 2016 election, Russia attacked the United States. Yes, I don't think they attacked the United States.
Okay, and yet you just denied being an apologist for Russia. You're apologizing for
Wait, you're not apologizing if it didn't happen.
Well, you haven't let me finish. You don't know what I'm going to say.
Please
the meddling began, Mr. Cooper, and the meddling began right after the Russian Revolution when Woodrow Wilson sent American troops to fight in the Russian Civil War against the communists. The meddling began on the Soviet and Russian. Let me finish. On the meddling side, when the communists formed the Communist International, 1919. Ever since then, Moscow's meddled in our politics. We have meddled in theirs. This is low-level stuff, what went on. It is not an attack. It is not 9/11. It is not Pearl Harbor. It is not Russian paratroopers descending on Washington. This kind of hyperbole, an attack on America, suggests we need to attack Russia. So you've got Mr. Boot saying that Trump should threaten Russia with what? Does he want to attack?
Try
You know what I
sanctions.
think?
All right. That was amazing. So, wow, that was great.
Like, look at the feeble mind on display there, not just from Max Boot, but also Anderson Cooper. He's like, so you believe Vladimir Putin? And
Right.
someone's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I take what the Russian president says seriously. He's a leader of a country,
Right.
And Max Boot is indignant. They are attacking us. Like, so again, even if everything Russia is accused of is true, what does attacking us mean? They stole some emails from a Democratic Party and they put up some dumb ads on social media. But the American imperial mind is so feeble, and you have to be when you're an imperialist, when you derive your meaning and your existence from actually stomping on everyone else's neck around the world, that you're so feeble and weak-brained that even if a country, all they're doing is stealing some emails and putting up some ads on social media, as opposed to our country bombing other governments, regime change, sanctions, all this stuff, all of a sudden what they're doing is deemed an attack on us. And look at the way Stephen Cohen handles it all. And when he gets insulted, he doesn't insult back. He's so calm and collected, and he appeals to facts and reason and history, which he has a mastery of, and no one else on that panel does, and no one else really allowed on CNN anymore ever does. And the fact that he was able to get to that space speaks to just how accomplished and smart he is. And there'll never be anyone like him. There just won't.
Yeah. Well, thank you to you for helping document him, and sorry for your loss. And kind of coming full circle, Jen, who was the person I believe who asked you that great question about the top 3 examples to debunk Russiagate, says, please clip this so we can share what damage Russiagate caused. Aaron is so good at explaining what happened. So I will, and I'll clip the Stephen part too. Why is this important? Like, I'm already hearing the pushback in my head from people being like, well, we're trying to defeat Trump, and why are you talking about this now? Talk about it later. What is the importance of talking about this stuff? Not just now, I guess in general, but.
Well, there's not it's not like paramount that we discuss it now. I do agree that the top priority should be defeating Trump. And so, yeah, but look, this is not going away. What's been entrenched, where it's been established that bipartisan policy means hostility to Russia, and this culture where it's deemed okay for the U.S. intelligence services to be weaponized for political uses to, in this case, undermine Trump for narrow reasons, not because they didn't like Trump's warmongering, but because they didn't like that he was talking about having better relations with Russia, and he was criticizing proxy wars and regime change wars abroad. Russiagate was a good way to undermine that because it boxed him in. It encouraged him to be more hawkish towards Russia. And it also, whenever he said something anti-war, that was painted as being, helping Russia. So the damages of this culture that has been established, where any view that dissents from the prevailing establishment consensus, especially on war, I mean, that's going to be with us now for a long time, even worse than it was before, which has always been a problem. And so we're going to have to think about that in the culture that arises, no matter who is the president. And if it's Biden, I'm sure Biden will. I think Biden will actually be less hawkish on Russia than Trump was. I think, but because Trump's been just, Trump tore up nuclear treaties that I think Biden wants to revive, because the New START treaty was actually an Obama treaty. So I have a hard time seeing Biden not reviving that. But the culture, where it's just established that we're all supposed to be cold warriors now, to be woke. It's like Adam Schiff is our hero, and we're supposed to worship intelligence officials. That is going to be a problem amongst many things. And stopping Russian disinformation, or this claim to stop Russian disinformation, will also be used to censor dissenting views, to block them on Twitter and Facebook, to shut down pages. So it's just important to think about the long-term impacts of a chauvinist, militarist, Cold War conspiracy theory. And I don't think it goes away even if Donald Trump is defeated.
Yeah, I'll just add McCarthyite and intelligence agency exalting. Yeah. Well, thank you, Aaron. This was such a treat. Wow, I can't believe how long we talked. Thank you so much for all your time. Really, really great and great work. I'll link to your videos and in here so that they can see you addressing the excellencies of the UN.
Yes, the excellencies. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you, and great to speak to everybody and catch the comments that I did, even the negative ones.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Aaron. I'll stay on for a couple minutes and chat with you guys.
Okay.
Bye, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
That was great. Woo! That was really great. Great guest, right? Let's see. I wanted to just give some shouts out to super chatters who I didn't have time to thank, but also you guys can ask me questions, because that's kind of boring to just do super chat, constantly. Also, just gonna again, gotta do it. And thank you guys. Some of you joined during the show. Should I read your names out loud? I don't want to violate anyone's privacy, but lots of shows say thank the people who donated, so I can do that. Let us see. What was I going to? Oh, I was going to go look and see all right. I'm sorry that I have to get a lot more women on. I've just yeah. Don't worry, it'll happen. It happens all the time. I've had lots of women guests on. It's just this happened to be a kind of, I don't know what the word is. Okay, let's see. Live chat. All messages. Okay, let's see. Oh, I know how to do it. Yeah, you can go to bed now. I don't think I'm going to be doing, let's see. There needs to be an app where let's see, where are the super stickers? I think I read most of the super stickers, right? Let's see. I'm going to make Kelly. I think Kelly's walking her dog, but I shouldn't let her. I should build that into our working relationship. No dog walks while we're live. Just kidding. That would be cruel. If I didn't thank you, Brian, for saying Aaron's the best. Hit the like button, guys. Hit that like button. Smash that like button. What gives? This should be very easy to do. Let's see. Yeah, I need help doing. I can't find the likes. I'll do the likes for next time, if that's okay. This is good. This chat is growing because I can't find those things. Yeah, but we've been going for a long time, which is great. Yeah, I'll clip this. Anyone want to volunteer to help with clipping? Not for free, obviously, but yeah, Aaron was great. Thank you, Phil. And let's see what else. Who else do you guys want to have on? I've taken a lot of your suggestions down. Sometimes, by the way, I ask questions that are rhetorical, that I don't think is true, but I think it's worth asking. Like when I asked him about the quote unquote mistake he made, it's not because I actually care. The point is, okay, Aaron is the best. I agree, Brian. Hit the like button. I agree, Brad. Yeah, should I be doing a Discord thing? I just can't. It's too much. Look into getting Status Quo's Jen on for interview. Okay, I will add that name. Thank you, Bill Cole, for your very generous super sticker. And I will get back to the person who asked about donating non-Patreon, but in PayPal. I'll look into that. I do have that, but okay. Thank you again, Bill Cole. How do you think RG will play into a Biden administration? What's RG? Is that really not obvious? Yeah, I'd love to have them on. Oh, do the 5. I like that. Okay. Oh, you'd volunteer. Cool. What's your Twitter handle, Jasmine? And I'll contact you. That's how I do it. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I may do a special show tomorrow. I'm not sure because I kind of want to do a hunter deep dive, but I may just wait to do that until Sunday night with Jack, major hunterologist. But I'm going to release some clips of our hunter chats and all of that jazz. Okay. It's really cold where I am. Sorry, Stephen Cole. Bill Cole was my pop's name, who recently passed away. Laura was a golden heart. Glad to see a like-minded Bill. Oh, that's sweet. I'm going to oh wow, an AP photographer's cover got annihilated. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm going to tweet right now. Here, this tweet that I tweeted where I said I'm so excited about the show. If you have anything you want to say, like ideas for a logo, which I'm still thinking about and talking to people about, ideas for a logo or volunteering to clip, or whoever says that they want to help with tech stuff, that would be great. So just put it under my pinned tweet, which may not always be pinned, but you can find it. And it's where I mentioned this show. I say I'm excited about this show. Okay. Whitney Webb. Okay, I'll have her on. All right. I gotta go. I'm freezing, and I hope you guys are having a good night. And Jared Kushner, yeah, read about what he asked the ambassador. He asked Michael Flynn to ask the ambassador. Thanks, everyone. And you did a parody intro for this show. Okay, send it all. Tweet under this thing. Let me make sure I have it. So. Let's see. Yeah, also tweet if you're like, make sure you clip this part or that part. Tell me, because I need all the help I can get with this stuff. That's the tweet that you can do it under. Okay, thank you so much to Kelly. Thank you so much to Brad. And I don't know how to get another. I'll start an email for this show so people can email me at that. But I don't have it yet. So you don't Twitter? I'll put it on my channel. What's your channel, Garden Gnome? I do not tweet. You should at least lurk. Okay. So Garden Gnome, is that your name on YouTube? All right. Okay. I will talk to you guys later. I'll see you Sunday night. And if I have another thing I'm doing, I plan to do, I'll let you guys know. Okay, bye everyone. Oh, please, patreon.com/the Katie Halper Show, patreon.com/the Katie Halper Show. And subscribe and get your friends to subscribe. We got to up these subscription numbers, which I don't even think makes me money. It's just important to do, apparently. Even lurking on Twitter and reduce your intelligence. Okay, Twitter hardly even knew her. All right. Bye everyone.